This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
I'd give you the money myself if you can come up with a topic that would allow us to spend an hour talking about Liz Truss sending a legal letter to Keir Starmer to tell him to stop saying that she crashed the economy. I've been doing this 20 years, give or take. I've got nothing. You can't do a phone-in on how did someone end up so bonkers, can you? Or what is it that what is it that has actually happened here? Can you? You can't, can you? Oh, man alive. What a story. I don't know if you've missed it. It was just in Thomas's news bulletin there. But I'll tell you what we could do. We could launch another feature that takes us 6 months to get a jingle and then I forget about. We could call it Free Speech Watch. All the people that are always wanging on about free speech and how important it is and how Elon Musk's myriad lies and release on his social media platform of various toxic grifters is somehow proof that free speech, and then when actual free speech is exercised, or when they find themselves on the end of some relatively mild criticism, largely evidence-based, they call the bloody lawyers. Liz Truss has sent a cease and desist letter to Sir Keir Starmer demanding that he stops claiming she crashed the economy. The Telegraph can. So we should rephrase that, shouldn't we? Free speech warrior and Elon Musk fan Liz Truss has sent a cease and desist letter to Sir Keir Starmer demanding that he stops claiming she crashed the economy. I learned something about Elon Musk yesterday that is mildly pertinent to one element of the conversation that we're about to have. And it was that his own father has had 2 children with Elon Musk's stepsister. So that means he's had 2 children with his own stepdaughter. The word grooming is being bandied around a hell of a lot, isn't it, in the current context, current conversation, for a variety of reasons, many of them quite valid. But I don't know what word you'd use to describe that courtship. Absolutely extraordinary. So that means that he's got a half sibling who's also his step nephew. So his half brother would be his step nephew. Yeah, but tell me again about why poor kids end up getting involved in crime because of bad parenting. In fact, tell me now. And I say that a little bit dismissively. It's probably not fair. It's just that sometimes I get messages at the top of the show which appear to owe a little bit more to other interpretations of the news than the one that I'm about to share with you. So Dan is adamant that this poor boy who's dead at 14 is actually a victim of his own mother and her negligence and delinquency as opposed to of the circumstances in which he grew up. And there it is. Let me get it for you. He was groomed at 6 years old. A kid that young being groomed by gangs is a simple failure to parent your child. What were you allowed to do and where were you allowed to go when you were 6? Listen, I understand where you're coming from. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, Dan. You're coming from a position where you want to believe that you can make your children safe. And that is a noble belief. That is a perfectly valid belief. It's why, oddly, your message made me think of the McCanns. I often think of the McCanns when there are stories involving dead children, partly for obvious reasons, but partly for reasons that are a little less obvious. Because I don't know if you remember, in the aftermath of the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, and of course we don't know that she's actually dead, do we? You're coming up with suggestions for how we could spend an hour talking about Liz Truss. I'm going to pause that and have come back to them in a moment. Do you know, I spent years thinking that the big pause button on my screen was the number 11 until Keith pointed out that you can actually pause your inbox so it doesn't have to chug past you like a ticker tape. I digress. In the immediate aftermath of Madeleine McCann's disappearance, there was... In fact, do you know, it's interesting that I wonder if it was one of the earliest illustrations of where we are now in terms of misinformation and online madness, because an incredible subculture grew up, and I don't think it was even monetized then. So you can make quite a lot of money now on social media by telling lies about everything from vaccines to Keir Starmer's record on grooming gangs, as many people are currently doing. But in the immediate aftermath of Madeleine McCann's disappearance, I was staggered. And I think it was probably one of the first times in this job that I realised what an extraordinary weather vane I had for elements of public opinion. We've still got the problem of not being able to separate online from public. I think the terminally online are currently in the driving seat, and the toxic and terminally online are currently in the driving seat. They don't represent broader public opinion, but politicians and journalists are so plugged into that alternative universe that there's a danger of over-egging it. So I don't know how many people. It's like a phone-in show, actually, when you think about it. I mean, do callers represent public opinion? It depends on how you phrase the question. Historically, conversations about immigration could be phrased by, should we say, less righteous presenters than me as an invitation to ring in and tell me why you don't like foreigners, or even to ring in and tell me why you don't like Muslims, or why you don't like immigrants, or why you don't like asylum seekers, or why you don't like refugees. And if that's how you phrased the question, then you could come away thinking that reflects public opinion. But of course, the minute you ask why, and somebody says, well, I just don't read that, and then no member of the public is going to want to be lumped in with them. So in the same way that you can't always use a phone-in as a gauge of public opinion, so it is with the online universe now. So it is with the idea that, oh, look, that's got 12,000 likes, or that's got 10 million views. That must mean that most people agree with it. And you see why people end up thinking that. So I don't know how widespread the desire to blame Madeleine McCann's parents for Madeleine McCann's abduction was, but I worked quite hard to understand it. I went from I think quite a condescending dismissal of people for being so vile, to understanding why you were so desperate to believe that it was their fault. And I had a little girl of a similar age at the time. And it was because we want to believe that our little girls are safe. So we want to believe that when we go on holiday, we will not do things that leave them exposed to the possibility of abduction. And the details of the McCann's case lent themselves to sort of amateur sleuthing and amateur blaming. We took calls, I don't know if you remember, from people who reminded us that in the holiday camps of the 60s and the 70s, you'd tie a handkerchief to the door of your chalet to advertise to everybody else in the holiday camp that there were unaccompanied children in the chalet while you went off to play bingo or enter the knobbly knees contest or have your dinner or have your tea without the kids. So that shift in public attitude was extraordinary. And it's ended up in a place where we attack often victims of terrible occurrences as a way of convincing ourselves that it could never happen to us. But bad things can happen to anybody. You could ask this morning who radicalised Liz Truss, for example, as Lou suggests as a possibility for the topic that I'm currently unable to frame for myself. So anybody arguably can get radicalised if the circumstances are correct. And almost anybody, I think, can get groomed. It was a lesson of the conversations about the paedophile gangs that we've been having all week. How weird is it that when a 14-year-old boy gets murdered on a bus in London, people are queuing up to blame it on parenting or absent fathers, and yet when little girls get exploited and abused by gangs of paedophiles, nobody would dream of trying to blame it on, or at least an awful lot of the people trying to make political capital out of it would never dream about trying to blame it on the parents. I think that you can't have it both ways. I think if you're going to say that this 14-year-old lad has been murdered on a bus in London as a consequence of poor parenting, then you have to say the same about victims of other crimes that involve grooming. So Dan would have to say, for example, in response to the victims of the grooming gangs in Rotherham and Rochdale and Telford and elsewhere, he'd have to say these girls were as young as 10 and 11 when they were being groomed. What were you allowed to do when you were 10 or 11? It's obviously a failure of parenting. I don't know, Dan. He may get back in touch. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't say that about those white girls. But this black boy, he's perfectly happy to suggest is dead or a victim of crime as a consequence of poor parenting. Interesting. So, what happens? What happens? The mother of Kelyan Bokassa has talked about how we all need to get involved, how he is in some ways a victim of an inevitable escalation, how he was exposed to drugs, how he was missing for a year, living on the street, taken advantage of by gangs. She uses the word groomed. He turned up back on my doorstep after a year, underweight and tattooed. He probably experienced something. I could sense it. It sounds to my untutored eye like a county lines case, doesn't it? But I'm going to choose my words very carefully now. And you're going to help me. You're going to help me. You see a lad going to school, final year of primary school, right? And I don't know whether this is a bit glib or simplistic, but you know they're good boys, right? I come to work on public transport every morning, although if the weather doesn't improve, I might actually book myself a cab for the next couple of weeks. It's so cold. And the buses, you know what bus, well, you may not, but buses, if you catch them at a certain time of day, are like ant farms of school children. And on my bus routes, there's a couple of all-boys state schools that are responsible for the bulk of the passengers that prevent me often from getting a seat. And there's a mix. There's always one doing his homework on his lap on the bus. There's 3 or 4 who are trying to play the same computer game or arguing over some technology. There's some who are just chatting. There's a couple who are sort of sitting there looking quite swottish and bookish and discussing matters academic, all of those things. But at that age, generally speaking, they are good boys. If you want a visual image, you think of a boy, and I'm going to use Kelyan Bokassa as an example, so I'm going to reference his ethnicity, because getting involved in this kind of gang activity is disproportionately likely to happen to people from his ethnic demographic. It's more likely to happen to black kids. So it is not exclusively black kids that we're talking about today, but I think it's important to recognise that it is disproportionately black kids that we're talking about today. And we know the reasons, largely, are going to be driven by poverty, institutional racism, and even sort of post-colonial infrastructure. But that's a conversation for a different day. You see a black boy, 11 years old, walking to school with his tie done up correctly, looking smart. Mum's brushed his blazer. He's got a nice rucksack. He is a good kid. And the massive majority of lads in that category will remain so. But something happens when they leave primary school, when they become exposed to different influences. Teachers tell me that it is extraordinary. Kids get lost, even kids who don't end up in trouble either. And the thing about being murdered in circumstances like this is that the line between victim and perpetrator is quite perforated. He'd obviously been involved in criminality, so he is both a victim of crime in the worst imaginable way, and also a perpetrator, almost certainly, according to his mum, of crime as well. Something begins to happen. And it doesn't happen organically, does it? It's not like somebody wakes up one morning and decides, do you know what, I'm not going to do my homework today, I'm going to get involved in drugs or drug dealing. Or, do you know what, I'm not going to go and play football with those mates after school today, I'm going to go and smoke weed with those mates after school today. And a ball starts rolling. And for most of us, or for most of these young boys, that ball will carry on rolling. And it won't necessarily grow. It won't necessarily snowball. Lots of kids who become a little bit naughty at 13, 14 years old remain a little bit naughty to 18, 19, 25, 26 years old, but they never cross the big Rubicon. They never cross the line into from using to dealing, for example, from customer to vendor. But some do. And I want to know how it happens. I don't want to know why it happens, because you can't answer that question, and it's not helpful. Born though it is of a noble impulse to believe that it couldn't happen to you, it's not helpful to suggest that it happens because dad's not there, or it happens because culture, or it happens because music. All of these things may have contributions to make to the conversation. But how many times have we sat here and pointed out that simplistic answers to complicated questions make everything worse, not better? So Dan, I'm sorry to pick on you, mate. Dan might derive reassurance from the thought that it couldn't happen to his kids because of him. But what message does that send to the victims of all grooming gangs, of every hue, creed and colour? Are you really telling all of the parents and all of the victims of all of the grooming gangs that it's mum or dad's fault that they ended up in that? So I don't think you are, Dan, and I hope that's been helpful for you. But for me, talk me through the process. And it means either that you've been through it yourself, or you've watched it happen to somebody else, possibly someone you love. I just want to know what the process is. You don't have to give me all of it. You can give me various steps on the path to the sort of situation that Kelyan Bokassa seems to have found himself in. My son and others were taken advantage of by gangs. They were groomed. What does that mean? What does that mean? And I hope this isn't inappropriate. I hope this is helpful. What changes that 11-year-old on the bus in his blazer with his tie done up properly and his homework in his bag? What happens that can mean within 3 or 4 years that lad is a stranger to his own family and quite possibly dead on the top deck of a London bus? What happens? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. The actual process, the conversations, the contacts, the kind of characters who come into the kind of lives that Kelyan seems to have led. What actually happens? Because the massive majority of us haven't got a Scooby-Doo. We really haven't got a Scooby-Doo. And that's why I think his mum's right. We never will until we seek to understand it better. So, what happened, or rather, what happens to a boy like Kelyan Bokassa? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's 10:20.
James O'Brien on LBC.
22 minutes after 10. Is it a sliding door? Is there a pivot point, looking back, where you think, that's where I went down the path I wish I'd never gone down? Anyway, you've heard enough from me. Let's open up the phone lines. Musa is in Thornton Heath. Musa, what made you pick up the phone?
Hey, you're right, James. Yeah, sorry, I was listening to you this morning and
good.
A few of
That's
the
a good start.
The other callers. And it just kind of got me thinking. I think, should I ring in and just sort of say what's on my mind? And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell you, sort of thing, you know. So basically, me and my brother and I went initially to a private school when we were very young. Right. Mum and Dad put us straight into private school. You know, they worked their asses off and got us into a private school. But during sort of secondary school sort of time, they couldn't, I don't know, for whatever reason, they couldn't keep us in private school, so they put us into public school. And that's where things really started to change, because when me and my brother went to a public school, we were very sort of like, we didn't have many friends there. We were sort of, you know, we were bullied a lot as well. Mum's English, Dad's Turkish Cypriot, so we were bullied, you know, because they knew we were Turkish. We had different names, obviously. And so we didn't have many sort of friends in secondary school at that time. So when we were sort of like leaving school, we would then meet other kids that were outside of school, and they were obviously in gangs, and that's where we made friends there.
What do you mean when you say obviously? Because remember, for a lot of people listening, perhaps for the people who were at your previous private school, and when you say public, just for clarity, you mean state, more commonly.
Sorry.
No, it's a weird sort of glitch of the English language
State
that
school.
public school generally refers to the most expensive schools in the country. But I know everyone knows what you mean. When you say obviously they were in gangs, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, there were the sort of kids that were outside of school, hanging around, you know, not going home when they should be, things like that. We were sort of drawn into them.
Okay, so I mean, most kids at that age are not going straight home, are they?
Yeah. No, I know. Well, I think even the kids that were in our state school, most of them, we never saw any of them outside of school.
Okay, so what we're thinking back to a moment, because I presume you went, I don't know what word to use, rogue. I don't like the word bad. I apologise for using that. But where is the moment that, looking back, you see as pivotal?
I think it was at that moment when we went into public school. I think, I'm not saying anything about race or anything like that, but that did make it much more difficult for us.
But in terms of what happened to you, so when you made a choice or did so, do you see what I mean? So yeah, you were a good kid, and then you weren't.
If you listen to the story, you'll know. You know, if you hear the sort of story of what had actually happened, because I did most of this to protect my younger brother. Yeah. He was the clever one. He was the smart one. Okay. You know, I knew he was going to do well, so I was there to sort of protect him. I didn't really care what happened to me at the time. I was a bad egg, you know, at that time in my life. I was definitely.
Well, I don't know what that means. I'm trying to apologise for badgering the witness, but what happened?
Right. I stole a car when I was younger.
Right.
It was actually my dad's car. Someone had given it to him to give to me when I'd passed my driving test. Right. But without him knowing about it, I was taking the car out, driving it around, you know, and I was doing it just to be cool.
Are we discussing an adolescence or a period of youth in which you could have 17, ended up being murdered?
16. No.
Okay. I fully appreciate that. I really do, and I'm very relieved that you found yourself in nothing like the kind of situations that we're trying to explore this morning. But you make a valid point in that decision to do naughty things, what word am I looking for? Illegal things. It has very little, in your case, to do with background. Parents who strove to send you to private school, all of that, providing no insulation whatsoever from that ability to make the wrong choice, to go down the wrong path. Adam is in Hackney. Adam, what would you like to say?
Well, hi there. I'd just like to kind of give you my experience growing up, because I think I grew up following that lifestyle that you've mentioned.
Well, I need help. I need a bit of help knowing what that lifestyle is. I worry that I haven't made it clear just how naive, or not naive, just how uninformed many people listening will be, whereas people who've lived it just think that that's normal.
This is it, and that's what I want to elaborate. I grew up in a council estate in Hackney, and growing up, both my parents were there at the time. I had two older brothers who were everyone was on my case, pushing me to do well academically, making sure I'm home at certain times, giving me consequences if I did something that wasn't, that was punishable.
Yes.
So I had all of that. But what happened, the environment that I grew up in, it was normal to go down the route of becoming a drug dealer.
How does that happen?
And this is the thing. It wasn't the exception. The majority of the older lots that were in my estate, available to me, around me, or in the close vicinity, they were all drug dealers.
Yes.
And
you know them, and in some ways, you're going to look up to them, regardless of what not least because of the spending power that some of them have. And then some boys,
spending power, I think it's more the image they have and the way they treat you.
Yes,
they were there available for you when you had questions, or when you wanted something, when you wanted help with something, or you needed something.
This is grooming. This is grooming. So they become what appears to be a benign influence in your life, someone you can turn to in a time of trouble, someone who is looking out for you.
And they're there, and no one else is there.
Bingo.
Your parents will give you what the best they could, which wasn't much compared to what you could get in terms of, I don't know, if you wanted some new trainers, or you needed some, you know what, he'll say, do this for me, I'll make sure you got £100 in your pocket in the weekend.
How do you think they know? How do you think they know who to target?
I don't think there was. I think it wasn't a target. It was just, you treat your youngers like that.
You try everybody, and then some people will emerge as more likely for moving to the next level than others.
Yeah, and some are successful at doing those tasks. They're a bit more entrepreneurial, so to speak. They know how to manage their money well. Yeah. They become the drug dealers. The others end up giving it up because it wasn't for them. And then you end up going further and further down the rabbit hole until either you end up getting killed, or you end up in jail, or you get out, fortunately.
What happened to you?
Growing up, from about 18, 19, my brother is a business owner. He rents out cars transfers or not. He got me into that. He made an investment on my behalf. And he goes, you're going to pay me back in the future. And I got into that side. I took it more serious. I've now got 3 businesses, so I'm doing all right for myself. But that's not the case for the majority of my friends that were living the same life as I was.
And when you look at them and when you look at younger you, the ones that went down that path, do they have anything in common, or could it be anybody? I mean, people want to talk about, certain types of people want to talk about drill music or rap music or absent fathers, and these will be contributory factors. But in terms of the human being that we should all be trying to help, that's no help at all, pointing out these tropes.
No,
for you looking at them, do they have anything in common?
Looking back at it, I think there's a large percentage that went down that route were actually probably the more intelligent bunch of the lot.
Wow.
And that had the capacity to do well, but unfortunately chose to do it down the wrong avenue.
So if you talk about entrepreneurial flair, you need entrepreneurial flair, whether you're pursuing a criminal business or a legal business.
Someone that has charisma, someone able to influence the youth around them, the friends around them, someone that is able to build a customer base, obviously speaking specifically, let's just say about drug dealing.
I understand.
Someone that has those characteristics, someone that knows how to forecast the expenditure and what they're going to bring in. They were the ones who went down worse than the others.
Wow. And do you know, I shouldn't be getting penny drop moments on this sort of territory after exploring it for so long, but you're talking about skills and abilities that society should be nurturing and valuing. But if society is not nurturing and valuing them, then they will, to be glib for a moment, Adam, then the same skills and talents will turn to the dark side.
100%. And I was on the gifted and talented program when I was in secondary school.
Right.
And I was removed from it. My deputy head teacher, I don't want to name the school, she told me, you're going to be a failure and you're going to end up on the street. And my parents always were telling me, no, you can do better for yourself. Don't listen to that. I had a teacher, my history teacher, who told me, you know what, you're intelligent, you're bright. You know, give it your best. You can do something well for yourself. You don't have to do this.
So the first lesson of the day there is for me at least an upending of some of the presumptions and stereotypes, that you sort of think of these lads as being the more vulnerable ones, the more impressionable ones, the more easily malleable ones, the more groomable ones. But the grooming process will actually operate as a sort of editing. And under Adam's analysis, and you're welcome to challenge it with your own experiences and knowledge, but under Adam's analysis, the boys that will rise fastest are in some ways the most gifted and the most talented, which turns upside down almost all of the commentary that you will receive or hear from right-wing media. Wow. Thank you, mate. 10:33 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
36 is the time. It's about simple economics and opportunity, James. If you have no hope, no prospects, and face huge discrimination and bias, it's easy to see how people can choose this path. For many, it's not even a choice. I don't know that I can say I disagree that it's never, ever a choice, but goodness me, it is clearly not as straightforward as some people on the other side of the argument may like to believe. Here's Adam, for example. Why do you make blatantly untrue statements about the so-called right-wing media? You are the ignorant one. I have read many articles suggesting that entrepreneurial, charismatic kids end up in gangs and pursuing a life of crime. I don't understand your message, Adam. I'm sorry, but I apologise for any offence caused. I think that's the phrase you use. The discussion today is about that pivot point, that moment where I'm using the visual image because I find it really helpful. Where the not necessarily a model pupil, but a well-behaved 11-year-old boy leaves primary school, goes to secondary school, and 2-3 years later ends up in all sorts of trouble, possibly trouble as profound as Kelyan Bokassa, murdered on a London bus, his name released yesterday. Daryl knows. He goes, I think this is a sliding moment, James. There were 3 of us growing up, all best friends, all took the 11 plus from an inner city school in London. This is going back to the 70s, all brought up by single mothers, all living on the same council estate. Myself and one friend got into the grammar and the other didn't. He went to the local comprehensive. We'd been inseparable from the age of 6. But after one term in our new secondary schools, our friend who went to the comprehensive became unrecognisable from the boy we knew. He'd fallen in with the wrong crowd at school, and by 18 he was dead from a heroin overdose. To this day, writes Daryl, I'm convinced that if he'd passed that exam, he'd still be alive today. I know it's a glib phrase, but that's what we mean, I suppose, by a pivotal moment or a sliding door moment. Sarika is in Chiswick. Sarika, what would you like to say?
Hello there, James. I am Sarika, and I chair UK's largest children's charities. And just
sorry, your line went down there. You chair what, Sarika?
Action for Children.
Okay, carry on.
Okay. We released a report chaired by Alexis J, who's been in the news recently. Yeah, so about a few months ago on the criminal exploitation of children. Our contention is that the child needs to be treated as much as a victim as a criminal, because when they get involved in this, they are vulnerable, much like the girls that we've talked about, whether they're girls or boys. They're vulnerable. They come from all sorts of backgrounds. The inquiry panel talked to all sorts of victims, their families. They come from all backgrounds. We found kids of policemen getting involved in this. And it's the gangs. They go after different sets of vulnerabilities. It could be economic. It could be social. It could be trying to look like a sort of cool guy.
Yes, of course. Yes.
It's different motivations. But they are so young and they have no idea.
How young?
They are victims.
How young?
They could be 10, 11, 12, and then they cannot get out of it. Because once they are in, they are threatened, their family is threatened. We've seen cases of young children whose homes have been, something is thrown through the window, their families are threatened, they cannot get out. It's just awful. And that report, we have referred it to government, and we've said that the law needs to change where these children are treated as much as victims.
What would that look like in the legal context? What would that look like? I mean, you should say the law needs to change, but how would it change so that you have some sort of immunity from prosecution if you come forward to ask for help getting out of a situation which has criminalised you? I don't know.
It's also about making allowances for their vulnerability. So it's the same issue as with the young girls, is you can't treat them as having made lifestyle choices because they're too young to make those choices. If it's illegal for you to make decisions to vote when till you're a certain age, how can you be making decisions on crime? And I think the support that's needed, we run a program which was started in Scotland actually a long time back, and we've rolled it out to different cities called Sidestep, helping these children to step aside from crime to do something useful, to retrain, to get back into society. And it's that rehabilitation that is really, really important.
What do you think the pivotal points are? I mean, I appreciate you're like me, although you're doing a lot more important work than I am. You're not speaking from personal experience of having been groomed or having been criminalised in this way.
And
but that's go on.
I found your last caller really, really quite informative, because what he said is they can be clever, they can be smart, and they can be from all sorts of backgrounds. So there isn't a template that fits anything, really. And it's about when this happens, it's to extract those children from the gangs, because they are gangs, they are county lines, they're drug running, they are stealing cars, they're doing different things. So there isn't a template, but it's to recognize that this is what's happened to them, and there is a program where they can get out of it and get back into society and retrieve their lives.
Yes. And you know, I guess seeing them as lost causes or seeing their behaviour as an inevitable consequence of their domestic situation or their taste in music or even their ethnicity are all enormous obstacles to actually doing the relatively simple things that you describe. I mean, the parallels are obvious, but of course many people won't want to see them. Parallels with the almost exclusively, or certainly the disproportionately white, or maybe not disproportionately actually in the context of national demographics, but the victims of grooming gangs in the largely northern and Midlands towns that have been in the news for 12 years, or if you're an online grifter, have been in the news for the first time in recent weeks. That speaks to exactly the same process, and yet I wonder how many people are prepared to see it in exactly the same light. I wonder if Nigel Farage will be launching an independent inquiry into how people like Kelyan end up dead on a bus in the middle of the afternoon because he's a victim of grooming. What could the difference possibly be? Jane's in Brentwood. Jane, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I want to join this conversation. I know. I mean, it's really important to me. I mean, I've been fostering for a long, long time, and right. I've seen this a number of times.
I bet you have.
I've seen the journey, and one particular girl I will never forget. She was lovely. How her journey started was a bit of a chaotic home life, but right. nothing that would really send her down this path. But she, at 13, got into a sexual relationship with a older boy at school. She right. was a very bright girl. She was doing very well at school. Nothing to think that there would be any concerns, but he took nude photos of her and sent them all around the school, and that was the start of the journey, really, because she couldn't go back to school. She just couldn't face everybody, understandably. She kept running away from school, getting into arguments with her mum and stepfather. That was another key point, because, mum was torn. Where do my loyalties lay? It was troublesome, very troublesome, having a girl that wouldn't go to school and kept running away, staying out all night. Got involved with some lads. I don't know the ages, but some lads that were, using her, basically, trafficking her. She ended up living in a halfway house with some of these, and she was only 14 at that point. Mm. There was no way that she was going to go back to school. Where she lived was a rural community. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody's business. There was no way she could face anybody. There was no way back, really. But she did get taken into care. And that could have been a turning point for her, really. That could have been. But her self-esteem, the way she'd been used by these people, lads, they were young lads. Mm. Well, the way she'd been used by them meant that she had absolutely no self-esteem. It was in her boots, if you like. Yeah. And how do you get a girl back up like that? I mean, she came to us. At this point, after care, she came to you. She was while in care, of course. Yeah, of course. She got taken into care, and she got moved a long way from where she was originally. And we did actually manage. She was with us for about 18 months. We did manage to get her into college. She was about 15 at this time. Right. But she'd lost so much education by this time. This is the point, isn't these kids? I mean, it's hard enough. It's hard enough being an adolescent. But let alone an adolescent that hadn't been at school for 2 years. Yeah. Because where do you catch up? I mean, I think the schools were all really good, but they haven't got the resources. These kids need their hands held 24 hours a day. And one of the reasons I'm on now, I wanted to talk to you, is because I'm imploring people, if they think about fostering, can they do it? Can they take the next step? Because all of these cases we hear about with this trafficking, these grooming gangs, they obviously, it's a lot of children that are in a very vulnerable, precarious situation in the first place. And the Sarah Sharif story was so tragic, and I firmly believe that if I don't know this is just my assumptions, but I've seen it before. There are no places to put these children. So even if social care know that this child is in danger, there isn't anywhere to put them. This is why these kids end up in these very, very awful hostels or caravan sites. There's just not enough foster carers. I mean, it's just really, really a real problem. and particularly foster carers from ethnic groups. And I often wonder whether people that, you know, that are from an ethnic minority, they don't realise that they can foster, but fostering is crying out for people from ethnic minorities to foster. You know, sharing these same cultural idea, you know, life.
Yes.
So I know it's not the answer to the problem. Of course I know it's not.
There is no answer to the problem. All there is a combination of theories and ideas, and most of all, and I think what you've conveyed best of all, is probably hope, actually, Jane, and a belief in the children. Because I'll tell you what...
I never lose belief in
them. No, but how many people, when you describe this poor girl going AWOL, missing school... I wonder how many people see her in exactly the same light as they see the lad that we're talking about today, Kelyan Bokassa, when his mum reveals he disappeared for a year and lived on the streets and came back malnourished, sort of tattooed and terrified. And it's the same experience, isn't it? Except through a slightly different mangle, as it were.
These are children. They are children. And, you know, they haven't been... often, I'm generalising here, but often they haven't had... proper parenting, they haven't had guidance. Where are they going to go? How do they know their place in the world? Where do they get this guidance from? It's really, really tragic. And, you know, what we need to do is raise people's awareness. I've fostered for years and years, and it's never, ever the children's fault. Never the children's fault.
And it's also not helpful to the child to write it off as the parent's fault, the biological parent's fault. Or it doesn't help a child. It doesn't bring a child back to life. And you can make cases for saying the more domestic harmony you have, the less likely the child is to go down a dysfunctional path. I'm sure that's true statistically. But the problems that Jane describes need to be solved in the world that we inhabit, not in some mythical world dreamt up by a Daily Mail columnist when people never get divorced or fall out of love with their partners or have children outside of secure relationships. Crikey, thank you. You remind me, actually, I work with a charity that is very active in the fostering and adoption field and certainly looking after children leaving care. And we're doing an event on Wednesday at the National Theatre, a sort of collaboration with the new production of Ballet Shoes, Noel Streatfield's famous story about three adopted sisters and their found family. There's a new adaptation of that going out at the National. I'll be on stage on Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday the 15th of January, with the head of Quorum, talking about some of the issues that are thrown up by that play and by issues of adoption in general. I think there might still be some tickets left for that if you fancy coming along. It's 10:51.
James O'Brien on LBC.
53 is the time. It's a grim thought, isn't it? And I probably shouldn't share it with you, but sometimes I need you as much as perhaps you enjoy or need me in the morning. And I think I'll be talking about this until the day I retire, won't I? Particularly in the context of young black kids who've sort of fallen through the cracks of society. Adam's call resonates with me, the idea that it is often boys, young men possessed of skills that society ordinarily values. I suppose that was not quite as shocking as it first appeared when you think about some of the fictionalised accounts of gang life and the kind of characters that rise to the top of those pyramids would probably rise to the top of FTSE 100 companies if they'd been born under a different star. And yet when you hear someone explaining it in terms from the context of reality rather than a fictionalised version, it still slaps. It still surprises. You sort of still think, God, yes, of course. But not the foot soldiers, not the kind of the rank and file, but to coin a phrase, the top boys. 10:55 is the time. Thomas is in Ipswich. Thomas, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello,
thanks
mate.
for taking the call. We've had quite an issue with county lines drug dealing in Ipswich over the past decade or so.
Yes, I know.
And I've kind of been in that those groups where, you know, in my teens, and I'm in my 20s now, where some of them have gone on to, you know, be involved in crime, have prison sentences and convictions, and some of them have gone on to have, you know, very successful careers. They're all once part of the same group. I think what definitely made one group go one way and one group the other, is having positive influences to counterbalance the bad.
But this is the problem, is that the gang becomes the positive influence.
Yeah. No,
I don't know how you tackle that. I don't, and you know, respectfully, it's not much use to a 14-year-old who's wobbling to say he really needs some positive influences when he hasn't got any.
Yeah, and that's the point. Because a lot sometimes the positive influences come from people like youth workers and people who work in youth groups that are now underfunded. Yeah. And I think that's a topic for another day. But
it's not. It's absolutely a topic for today. And it I mean, to my shame, Thomas, I used to dismiss it. I used to sort of think, yeah, I've heard all that before. Tell me something I don't know. But there's a reason why it keeps popping up in the context of these sort of conversations. Where do you go if you can't go there? You're not going to stay at home. You know, that's just anathema to many 12, 13, 14-year-old boys and girls. Yeah. You're not going to stay at home. Where are you going to go? There's nowhere safe to go. So you end up in spaces that are varying degrees of unsafe.
Yeah, and I think Adam made a really good point. You know, a lot of these kids, they're drawn in by what they see as authority figures, older adults who are involved in crime. And
I think what we miss,
and showing them, what
exactly
they can buy.
Exactly that. It's not just here's some money, go and buy yourself some trainers. It's actually, I will protect you. I will make you feel safe, even as I lead you into a life of unparalleled insecurity and unsafeness. If you're trying to understand the moments, and there'll never be one single moment, I think that was a bit naive of me. It's going to be an accumulation of moments, isn't it? But if you feel frightened, if you're being bullied, if you're worried about getting stabbed, and then a big man tells you that you're all right now, you're his.
Well, that's the thing about perception of this kind of issue, because you only see the moments. You didn't see all the build-up to, how kids are being influenced. You only see the culmination of it.
Yes, that's right, isn't it? We don't hear about. My friend Jason Farrell has written a book about the county lines, actually, and goes into some of the places that I wish more journalists had gone into. But we don't hear about what this lad was doing when he disappeared for a year, which is going to be at least as important, if not more, to preventing it happening to other children than the fact that he ended up being stabbed to death on a bus.
Yeah, absolutely. So, having these types of conversations is very important.
Thomas, thank you. 03. Well, actually, we're more or less out of time. I'll try and squeeze in one more call. Andreas is in Balham. Andreas, what would you like to say?
I just wanted to touch on the fact about this young boy that was stabbed.
Yes.
And I was just like letting you know that it's the government. A lot of the parents have got a lot to do with it, of course.
Sure.
But I feel like the government knows exactly what's going on. They know our kids are getting killed left, right, and centre, and they do nothing about it. All they want to do is make money. They don't legalise the things that could help the kids, take them off the streets.
Do you think that would be a big game changer if you legalised cannabis initially? Is that what you're suggesting?
That would eliminate so many problems.
Because that black market or whatever you want to call it disappears overnight. It hasn't been quite that clear cut in territories where it has happened, but if you
look at Europe, sorry to interrupt.
Parts of
Europe, if you look at Europe, like places like Amsterdam, Spain, and other countries.
Portugal is the best example. Amsterdam has rode back on some of its legalisation or decriminalisation legislation, but that's the point, isn't it? If you are not. You would not be breaking the law, and you would therefore not need to be enforcing your. Shopkeepers don't go around stabbing each other, do they? You would just change the entire context of the the commerce.
So that's why I'm saying, and the government know what goes on. In fact, they've actually changed it from a Class C to a Class B. To actually punish people more.
Well, very different governments you're describing. It's sometimes not helpful to use the word in a generic way.
I'm saying the British government changed it from a Class
I know, but there's a big difference between a Labour government and a Conservative government. There's even a big difference between a Conservative government led by a head case like Liz Truss and she'd probably send me a legal letter now.
Okay, in terms of who controls what is legal in our society,
yes,
those are to blame. No matter who they are, what party they're from. those people are to blame because they know they can control this substance. They know that
they choose not to. I mean, I used to agree with you completely. I'm not quite as clear cut on it today as I used to be for a whole bunch of reasons that we've talked about before, and we'll no doubt talk again. But it is hard to see how it wouldn't help. My worry would be, Andreas, that the behaviours we're describing would just shift into other areas. So it is no longer cannabis that offers the early opportunity to make more money than you can make from legitimate work. It's the absence of opportunity, the absence of access to well-paid legitimate work that's the problem. So you open up a legalised cannabis industry, give it a year, mate, and that is going to be dominated by the same people, the same institutions and the same investors who dominate all other areas of commerce anyway. It's a bit like tobacco. I think that the big tobacco companies would have the cannabis business sewed up in days. So what would then happen to the young people who are currently vulnerable? They'd still be vulnerable. They'd just be vulnerable, I think, to a different thing. But I could, of course, be wrong. It's 11:01.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 5 minutes after 11. The prize is still here. What's the prize? A Mystery Hour board game? Mystery Hour with us, of course. It is Thursday. It's Thursday, right? Yes, it is. A Mystery Hour board game. Mystery Hour with us at 12 today. A welcome relief from the usually pretty grim menu of news that we are compelled to peruse every day. A lot of you got it for Christmas. I do enjoy it when you send me pictures of the family playing the Mystery Hour board game over the Christmas period. Given that I'm not on Twitter so much, or indeed at all anymore, I am confined to your pictures on Blue Sky. But it's lovely to see. Nice to see it still reaching parts that other board games cannot reach. But a prize for if you could come up with a way in which we could spend an hour laughing at Liz Truss after she sends a cease and desist legal letter to Keir Starmer over claims in the run-up to the election that she crashed the economy. I could do an hour on it myself probably, but I don't think anybody wants that, do they? Do you? No? All right, you don't have to be quite so adamant. It is arguably the maddest story of the year so far, albeit that it's only January the 9th. Free speech warrior Liz Truss calls for Keir Starmer to be somehow sanctioned for describing her as having crashed the economy. It's fantastic. And here's my favourite bit for regular listeners to this programme. Ms. Truss's lawyers cite a report by Andrew Lillico, a fellow of the Institute of Economic Affairs think tank, who explains his findings on a new episode of a podcast presented by Telegraph columnists Alison Pearson and Liam Halligan. At which point, well, maybe she's got a point then. If I was Keir Starmer, I'd be really worried now. That is like Avengers assembling on the whoa. If they're on her side, then Starmer's got some proper. Holy moly! 7 after 11 is the time. Right, complete change of pace, change of topic. A good old-fashioned phone in now. Born of a news story, but leading us into territory that does not need to be related in any way, shape or form directly to the story that we are having. Jenny, you're very kind. But Rob, God, a lot of you want me to try and do a whole hour alone on Liz Truss. I can't do an hour on it unless I've got a question that will invite calls. And I can't think of a question except ones that would be, I think, a little bit inappropriate. I mean, who radicalised her? Does that work? Who radicalised Liz Truss? I don't think it does. But anyway, I'll be keeping an eye on that story because now I know that the Institute of Economic Affairs, Alison Pearson and Liam Halligan are on her side. I'm beginning to think she's almost certainly guaranteed a victory. Perhaps similar to the one that the Institute of Economic Affairs enjoyed when they came after me. Oh, that was a real humiliation for one of us. Anyway, I digress. The civil service. I think the fact that civil servants is in the headline is designed to make you react to this story in a very specific and certain way. For reasons I don't fully understand, civil servants are very easily maligned. I remember as a child laughing at a joke that I didn't really understand. Did you ever hear this joke as a child? Why aren't civil servants allowed to look out of the window in the mornings? because then they'd have nothing to do in the afternoons. So, and that is going back 40 years. So there's obviously always been a widespread perception, probably not helped by the diaries that they based Yes Minister on. There's always been a widespread reception that civil servants are a little bit lazy. Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, worked tirelessly hard before he was sacked by his own constituents. He worked incredibly hard to convey the idea that civil servants were lazy, and a crucial part of it was their working from home. He insisted, for example, that all civil servants came back to the office, even after it was pointed out to him that there were more civil servants in each of the relevant departments than there were actual desks, because the new reality of working from home had been exacerbated, but not in fact invented by the lockdown measures. So 4,000 staff at the Land Registry, which is where you register ownership of property in England and Wales, are going on a sort of work to rule. You could call it a strike, and it is technically a strike. But what they're refusing to do is take on any extra work that they consider to be beyond their job description. So an awful lot of businesses rely on goodwill, don't they? I've been struck by a generational change. I don't want to over-egg this particular pudding, but I find that some younger colleagues, and I think I'm warm towards this now in a way that I didn't used to be, some younger colleagues are a lot less likely to go the extra mile than I was when I was their age. But when I was their age, I was better paid than them. I could conceivably buy my own property before I was 30. I had a semblance of job security, and I believed that loyalty would be reciprocated, perhaps naively. You know, when they're coming around to decide who's going to get made redundant, are they really going to look at who put in an extra hour before going home every night, as opposed to perhaps who brought in the most sales or who got the most bylines? I don't know, but I just make the point that the world is changing in a way, and yet still many operations, whether they're public sector or private sector, rely upon the goodwill of employees doing things that they are not necessarily paid to do or supposed to do. Okay? And then there's the other work to rule, which is relevant to the railways, of course, where train drivers routinely do overtime. The entire system depends upon train drivers doing overtime. So if they refuse to do overtime, which they are perfectly within their rights to do, it somehow is a strike, despite the fact that all they're doing is working the hours that they're contracted to do. I'm possibly overcomplicating the issue, because the question I've got for you is this. And I still find this fascinating, right? Why are they protesting? What are 4,000 staff unhappy about? They're going to strike indefinitely from this month. Why? Because they have been ordered to return to the office for 3 days in every week. As far as I can tell, there is no evidence whatsoever that this improves or damages productivity. And I think that needs to be a crucial part of our conversation, doesn't it? Because if you can prove beyond reasonable doubt that working from home for 3 days a week actually means you do less work, then it becomes a bit of a no-brainer. But if I say to, and I guess in a way, if you can prove that working from home for 3 days a week means that you do more work, then it becomes a bit of a no-brainer as well. So for the purposes of this conversation, right, and this is important, because it's not about whether you like working from home or not, it's about everybody else. And people who've never worked from home in their lives will be able to get stuck right into this conversation, because it's about a moral issue, this. And it plays into that moment ago where I referenced generational differences. So I used to think, and if I'm brutally honest with you, I think deep down I still do, and I don't fully understand why. It's a form of feudalism. I used to think that when the boss says jump, you say how high. And I talk about a generational shift. My younger people that I know do not feel that way, and nor should they. Nor should, quite the opposite in some cases, nor should they. When the boss says jump, quite often I find younger people are quite likely to say either no or why. Whereas when I was desperate to get ahead in this industry, in newspapers originally, I would do anything I was asked to do. I'd fetch dry cleaning. I'd place bets for one boss. I'd do absolutely, wouldn't cross my mind to say no. So you become you get a letter off someone who wants work. I'll make the tea if you want. I got one before Christmas. I'll make the tea if you want. And you think, of course you will. But I don't want to examine that necessarily that element of the conversation. The point really is that I still have that residual sense that the boss decides where I work, right? As I could do my show from home. I think John Peel did his show from home for a long time, didn't he? I proved during lockdown I could do the show from home. I don't think I could prove that the show didn't suffer. I think we all went a little bit mad during lockdown. I don't think my show would work if I couldn't see Keith's sparkling eyes or Eleanor's smiling face every day. It sort of fills my middle-aged heart with glee to see my two colleagues looking so happy and so enthusiastic and so excited really to be here every today, like two little Labradors. That's what it feels like when I come into work. Two little Labradors jumping up and trying to lick me. So without that every day, I would, I think, do a less energized show. The show would lose some of its papa, as you might call it. So I wouldn't really be able to argue that it makes no difference. But imagine that it did. Imagine that you couldn't tell whether I was doing the show from here or from the shed. I've actually moved house since then. I don't have a shed anymore. But that's why am I even saying that's by the by. So you can't tell whether I'm here or in the shed. And I don't tell you. You've got absolutely no way of telling. The show sounds exactly the same, both editorially and technically. The microphones sound the same. The show sounds the same. The noise coming out of your speakers sounds exactly the same. The energy is the same. The editorial nous is the same. The content is the same. The joy is the same. The anger, the fury, all of it is it's exactly the same. But Mr. Global says, we need you working in Leicester Square. You can no longer do the show from home. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. 60% of me responds to that scenario by going, yeah, of course, that's absolutely fine. You pay my wages, you tell me what to do. Up to a point, obviously. We've all got points at which we would push back. 4,000 civil servants say, no. Why should you? You do not have the right to tell me that I have to come to work. So in the absence of productivity graphs, in the absence of anything that describes productivity, okay, should your employer be able to tell you, to order you to work in the office? And this is going to impact on you, by the way, because there are possible delays to housing transactions. If you're rushing to complete a purchase before the stamp duty changes on April the 1st, this could be really bad news. As you'd expect, a spokesman for the Land Registry has says we believe this action will cause minimal impact to our services. But if you're effective directly, then minimal will matter. So listen, but by the way, stop sending me texts to tell me you could really tell the difference when I was in the shed. I know you could. There's no earthly way I'm going back to doing it in the shed. But it was a theoretical example, all right? And I like it because I want you to tell me, and this is, you do not need any personal experience on this one, although it might help if you have some. I just want to know your attitudes, your response to this question about the relationship between employer and employee, and my slightly surprising sense that of course the employer has the right to tell these civil servants that they should be working from the office, because it feels like a sort of contractual prerogative. I have the right to tell you that you should be working from the office. Okay? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's a bit of a change for us, this one, because it doesn't involve any personal experience whatsoever. I just want to know philosophically, morally, ethically, whether you think that the boss, your boss, my boss, any boss, should actually be able to determine and decide and insist, if you don't come into the office, you need to find another job. And remember, there's no productivity It doesn't affect the productivity, doesn't affect the way you do the job. It doesn't affect your figures. It doesn't affect your sales, your workload. It doesn't not affect what you get through in any way, shape or form. The job remains, the results remain identical, whether you're at home or whether you're at work, whether you're at the office, at the workplace. Two questions, actually. One's really self-indulgent, but hey-ho, it's my show. So the first question is, should the employer be able to insist, to order this measure? And the second one, completely self-indulgent, pathetically self-indulgent. Why do I think the boss should be able to? Is it my age? Is it my background? Is it my schooling? Is it a vestige of Catholic guilt? We've spent enough time together now for you to have an insight into my warped personality. Why on earth? Because you'd expect me to be the opposite, right? Knowing what you know about me. You'd expect me to be up the workers and all of that, not up the bosses. So what do you think about the issue? But also, and I promise not to make a habit of doing this, what do you think about me? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 22 after 11. Nassim possibly has nailed the JOB element of this conversation. You did it. You had to do it. So you want the next lot to do it too. That makes me guilty of something that I routinely lampoon other people for. Well, it didn't happen in my day, therefore there must be something fundamentally wrong with it. I think that seems possibly right. Maybe I am just indulging in precisely the sort of psychology that I usually lampoon other people for doing. Why should the boss be able to order where you work, decide where you do your job, if where you do your job makes no difference whatsoever to how you do your job? Your thoughts on this, please. And I am going to include the personal element. I wondered during the break whether or not there's a sense of holding back a tidal wave on this. When you think about how much work is computer-based, and I fully appreciate there's lots of jobs that could never be done remotely, retail, for example, or customer-facing retail, or public transport, or you don't need me to make a list. But if you think about all of the jobs that are computer-based, there's a sense of trying to hold back a tidal wave here. Why wouldn't you move to Thailand and live incredibly cheaply, potentially, in potential paradise? Why wouldn't you? Future's going to be a strange place, isn't it? But we're not there yet. Rachel's in Newport. Rachel, what do you think?
Morning, James.
Hello, Rachel.
Hi. I'm kind of torn. I worked 20 years in the customer service industry, on my feet, no breaks, that kind of thing. And I desperately wanted to work from home, and I wanted kind of a slice of that. I was lucky enough last year to be able to be put into that position. Okay. So working from home. And I love it. I feel I'm productive. I can go and pop and put the washing on. I can do my work. I'm only actually required to go in 1 day a week to the office, which I enjoy, which is fine. But I know other people are required to go in more on the different side of the civil service.
Well, let me steer you to the ethics of it. And can I ask how old you are, or would that be incredibly ungallant of me?
You can. I think we're similar age. I'm 46.
Okay, so 6 years younger than me. What do you think? Like the fundamental question, regardless of your own personal circumstances, should we be able to tell our boss where we will be working from for forevermore, or not? Our paymaster, our employer.
I'm kind of conflicted. I'm
going to keep a note of ages on this one. I'm going to do a graph, Rachel.
Do it. Because I was just actually saying to the lady who I was speaking to, I'm in the luxury position now. I can sit here listening to you whilst I'm doing my work. Gosh. And I love it. So
Hashtag winning.
And I couldn't do that in the office, which I absolutely, which I appreciate. Although my boss is very, very understanding and flexible, he's great. So I only need to do 1 day a week. However, if it was, coming back down to productivity, or like you previously said, if it was kind of
productivity is off the table. Productivity is off the table. You produce exactly the same amount of work at home.
I'm staying home.
I know you would, but should the boss be able to all right, fine. I do not want an employee who stays at home. You're perfectly entitled to find a job where you can stay at home, but if you want to carry on working for me, you come back into the office.
I've asked him, could I bring the ironing board then?
And the radio. And the radio. That's the thing, isn't it? It's a weird one. And so 52 and 46, perhaps not quite. So I put myself as 60%. I reckon if you're 25, you find this conversation almost ridiculous. Of course I should be able to work from home if my productivity isn't affected. I don't know. Let's plot maybe not plot a graph. That's a bit too much like hard work. But keep an eye on the age. 11:26 is the time. Sue is in Thurrock. Sue, what do you think?
Hi. I think, if productivity is not impacted,
off the table. Productivity not impacted at all.
You can work from home. Or if there's no...
No, but you can refuse the boss's order to come back to the office is the point. Not just that you can work from home, but that you refuse not to.
Yeah, but the thing is that a lot of people say that work in London actually get a London allowance.
Yeah, that's not really relevant to the conversation that we're having.
Well, it is.
Well, it isn't. I'm making up the rules here, Sue. Respectfully, I'm making up the rules here. You can't argue with me. You don't get your London waiting allowance if you're not doing the things that you get the London waiting allowance for, like living and working in London.
Yeah. So if they want that taken away, would that be okay?
Yes.
Right. Okay,
obviously.
That's fine then.
Wait, so that's a bit like saying, should you still get child benefit if you haven't got any children?
No, I mean, I just wanted to put that out there. So,
I know you did, and I'm telling you why you shouldn't have done. Should you still get child benefit if you haven't got any children?
No, you shouldn't.
Well, exactly. So should you get London waiting if you don't fit the criteria for which London waiting qualifies you?
Yeah, but I think there'd be a lot of complaints actually having that taken away.
We've got enough complaints in this world, Sue, that are actually real and happening without having to imagine ones that might if something unspecified happened at an undetermined point in the future.
Yeah, but I think that would probably lead to more strikes.
Well, I don't see how, because if you want to keep your London waiting, then you have to do the things that qualify you for the London waiting. But, I salute your ability to find a problem in an empty room. It's Roger in Letchworth next. Roger, what do you think?
Good morning, James. First time I've ever managed to speak to you after all these years.
You're very welcome.
But it's just you.
Yeah, but it's going to be an anticlimax, mate. I'd like to apologise in advance.
Apology accepted in advance. I've worked from home probably for about the last 15 years, and for your statistics, I am now, I don't believe it myself, I am 61.
No, never. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I keep thinking. I look in the mirror and thought, nah. However, my birth certificate says something otherwise. Now, in the first job where I was working from home, going into the office was kind of academic because we were so dispersed. Okay. And my nearest colleague was down in Kent, and I'm up in Letchworth. Used to have an office in Leeds.
But let's not get bogged down in the details, and let's head for the principle. If the boss had said, especially after years of working from home, as I think you've done for 15 years, if they said you're no longer allowed to, and if you don't like it, I'm wrapping your sandwiches in a road map and sending you on your way, would that be justified? Would that be fair?
Yes-ish.
You see, 61. I knew it.
Yeah, there's a bit of old
it's not fair, but it is, because I'm 52.
Well, pretty much when I started the new job I'm doing now, I was told that sort of home working is allowed sort of on a kind of 50-50 basis. This is not a hard and fast rule, as far as I know. Nobody checks up on you. It's kind of a trust basis, which is good. It's not such a big company as the one I was working for before either.
Yes.
But the basis for saying that is that they find that physically being together in a team environment helps the team bind.
Yes.
So it's more the psychology of it, which probably has some
But that's
kind of
going to be productivity
linked. You can't measure it, really.
Well, you can. The only reason that they would make that point is if it improved productivity, which is why I've taken productivity off the table. Some people will prefer to work in the workplace environment, which means they can find a job where they can, and some people will prefer not to, which means they can find a job where they don't have to. But should the boss be able to order you back without any proof that it improves anything? And you say yes because you're 61.
I tend towards yes. I'd like to
percentages.
Have
give me a
contract,
percentage.
Just
How
to
much?
Be clear.
Contracts don't matter. We're having a theoretical, ethical conversation. Percentage support for the idea that the boss decides where you work. 54%, 63%. Give me a number.
I'd probably say 2-1 to the boss.
Whoa, 66-33. No, I know because they are the boss. I think this is generational. Mr. P, I suspect, is much younger than both of us, Roger. He writes, well, obviously I really like you, but should the boss have the right to get me to work from the office? No. Simple answer, why would I? I'm less productive in the office. Productivity is off the table. There's no logic behind it. I think you're a bit pro-boss because you like working from the office and possibly your boss as well. I like my bosses very much. They're some of the most wonderful people. They're almost as nice as the people at Ofcom. But maybe that is part of the psychological processing that's going on here. I truly don't know, but I reckon if I had the ability, I would be able to prove that it's almost entirely generational. I've got a hook and tease for you. I haven't done it for a while. Nigel Farage, that well-known man of the people, was paid £189,000 last year for his work as a brand ambassador for a gold bullion company. Very important. Heard him on the radio the other day explaining how everyone's getting poorer at the moment in this country. I probably need qualifying slightly. So Nigel Farage was paid £189,000 last year as a brand ambassador for a gold company. Did he receive £189,000 for helping to flog gold bullion in return for 4 weeks' work, 4 months' work, 4 hours' work, or 4 years' work? So did that well-known man of the people and champion of the working class, Nigel Farage, receive £189,000 from a gold bullion company for doing 4 weeks' work, 4 months' work, 4 hours' work, or 4 years' work? Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:35. Just apropos the conversation we had in the last hour, I forgot to mention to you that the National Police Leader on child protection and abuse investigations has now urged officers not to be distracted by media coverage of grooming gangs, emphasising that they are only one element of a wider threat. I've also got the figures that the government released. Did you know this? I mean, again, things that you would imagine most journalists would be keen to bring to your attention if they were vaguely honest. Extraordinary scenes, really, with, I must get the identity of the Tory politicians that did it correct, but two Tories called upon the government to release the ethnicity of crime figures without realising that they already had. It's an incredible example of just how stupid Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, and Alicia Cairns is sadly the other person who made this request. Stephen Bush, fast becoming my favourite journalist over at the Financial Times, has written a splendid article in his sort of daily email a couple of days ago, actually, where he points out that the opposition have written to the government insisting that the government publish the latest data on the ethnicity of both victims and perpetrators of child sexual abuse in England and Wales. Policing is, of course, devolved in Scotland and Northern Ireland. And what Stephen Bush is, as far as I'm aware, the only journalist to point out is that despite Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, and Alicia Cairns, the Shadow Safeguarding Minister, insisting that the government publish data on the ethnicity of both victims and perpetrators, what they've missed is that they did it already in November. It's almost as if they couldn't give a hoot about facts and are dedicated entirely to bandwagons and provocations. So demanding that they publish ethnicity details, and they've already been published. And I mean, there are absolutely no surprises there at all. The breakdown of victim self-defined ethnicity puts 85% of victims in child sexual abuse cases are white, 3% are Asian, 4% black, 4% mixed, 4% other. And then the breakdown of the suspect, self-defined ethnicity in child sexual abuse cases, 83% are white, 7% are Asian, 5% are black, 3% are mixed, and 2% are other. So it's not so much that, or the fact that Farage and his mates yesterday were demanding inquiries into exclusively Asian child sexual abuse, which would leave out approximately 93% of crimes, actually probably more than 93%, because they're only interested in Pakistani heritage child abusers. One of the Reform MPs was calling for the children and wives of sex offenders, if they're Pakistani heritage, to be deported, which is an incredible moment. And I know, I don't know, not quite sure how seriously to take these clowns. Someone called Rupert Lowe gave a speech making this claim, which I just want to know, is it just brown rapists whose children get punished? Or will it be all rapists and child abusers whose own children get punished? So you get punished under Rupert Lowe's glorious rule, you get punished for having the horror of discovering that you've got a sex offender in your family or that you're married to one. An incredible intervention in the British Parliament, the likes of which I've never seen before in my life. So I don't know. If you know him, could you ask him? Is it just brown people who are going to be punished in this country if they are related to a criminal? Or will it be everybody? So if you are unlucky enough to discover that your brother is a sex offender, will you be punished as well? There's a case in America about a sister alleging that she was raped by her brother, one of the big tech bros. So under Rupert Lowe's reading of the situation, if it turned out that he had indeed raped his sister, he would want to deport the sister. I mean, this man sits in Parliament. What a world we live in. But anyway, an incredible moment. Two things there. You've got the National Police leader reminding us not to forget the 90+% of child sex abuse victims who were not abused by Asian men. And you've got the Tories demanding that the government release the details of ethnicity, which they had done last November. In fact, when they were released, the minister in charge, Jess Phillips, reminded us that child sexual abuse is a devastating crime, which can leave victims traumatised for the rest of their lives. But it's almost as if these people don't care about the actual facts because they're so busy bending the knee for Elon Musk. So, final point on this. True or false? It emerged after PMQs yesterday that Kemi Badenoch has not met a single survivor of child sexual abuse or grooming gangs, ever. True or false? All right, maybe that's too easy. It emerged after PMQs yesterday that Kemi Badenoch has never met a single survivor of child sexual abuse by grooming gangs or anybody else, and she doesn't feel the need ever to do so. I do this now. It happened twice this year. It happened when I read what Liz Truss had said about Jess Phillips, and it just happened again now. Things don't land completely with me until I'm sharing them with you. Kemi Badenoch yesterday dedicated 6 questions. She could have talked about the economic crisis that we appear to be teetering upon the brink of. She could have talked about Tulip Siddique's very curious housing arrangements. There's a million things she could have talked about at PMQs yesterday that would have been qualified as proper politics, but she didn't. She went in as an Elon Musk tribute act, professing to care profoundly about victims of a very specific kind of child sexual abuse. Keir Starmer pointed out she'd never raised the subject once in the House of Commons in 8 years as a politician, including as Children's Minister. But the question that some clever fellow asked after, or woman asked after the show, after PMQs, has she ever met a single victim? No. Will she, and neither does she feel the need ever to do so. Nothing says, I care, does it? Like, I've never met any of you and I don't feel the need ever to do so. Because I'm not really here for you. I'm just here to bend the knee to Elon Musk. Anyway, we digress. Back to the rather lighter element of conversation that we're having this hour, which is about whether or not your boss should be able to order you. Well, I'm more interested now in why I'm so... This isn't me, right? This is me forelock tugging and capped offing. I never capped off and forelock tug. Why have I... It just must be my age. James is in Nottingham. James, what would you like to say?
Hiya there, James. So I'm a young person. I'm 22 years old, and I've worked in various different industries. How
many various different industries have you worked in at 22 years old?
As in customer facing, so I've worked in shops and then also for charities, and now I'm working in the theatre industry.
Splendid. Two industries, 3 industries.
3 industries is what I would say.
Yes.
But for
I like it. That was you were speaking you were speaking fluent CV then, weren't you?
Oh, of course.
I've worked in various different industries, including a shop.
But I personally think it falls under your contract.
No. Yeah, everyone's turning me into a bully today. This always happens when I have an ethical conversation. The contract doesn't matter. Obviously, if it's in your contract, then you can't say I'm not going to do it. But it's not. The contract doesn't matter. Productivity doesn't matter. It's an ethical question of whether your paymaster should also be the master of where you do your work.
So then I would say yes. I say yes, they are allowed to tell you what you can and can't do.
And now I think you're more employable than all of the wretches who think they should be able to work from home. I just do. I just think you're going to go the extra mile for me when you come to work for O'Brien Incorporated.
It might be down to my age, my ignorancy in that sense of I have I'll do it for you attitude. It might be that, because my parents, on the other hand, have just changed jobs. they've gone from working at home for 20-ish years to now having to be required to come into the office for a couple days a week, and their mindset is why, and I'm like, well, because someone's telling you to do so, and you've said yes.
Oh, so you've reversed it.
Arguably, yeah. I think so.
Because I think most of your peers, and obviously, possibly with the exception of the charity work, unless you were chugging. Were you chugging?
No, I was sorting charity shop bags and all
well,
sorts.
Again, all three of your jobs could not have been done from home.
Yes, I think it definitely probably has to do with my ignorancy of
not ignorance, just lack of experience. Maybe if you had a job that you could equally do at work or at home, maybe you'd think, well, why on earth should? But I think you sound like the kind of person I could do business with. You see?
Well, yeah.
Producer's just written on the screen.
I'd like to bring.
The producer's just written on the screen. Perhaps it wouldn't be very good for someone to be surrounded by yes. Perhaps being surrounded by yes men or women is a bad thing, or not always what is needed. I've got an idea. Let's find out. Let's have an experiment. Let's see what happens when I am surrounded by people who are absolutely dedicated to making my wishes become fact. We'd have to have a bit of a clear out, wouldn't we? That's for sure. Do you think you're typical of your generation, or do you think you would stand out against the peer group?
I think out of the people I know, and sort of my university peers and all sorts, I think because of the trials and tribulations we have suffered over the past, since 2016, I think we have encountered a more can-do attitude of, yes, we might kick up a fuss, but at the end of the day, we're all tight for money, we're in a lot of debt, and I think we don't care what we're being told, we'll just do it.
It's funny, isn't it? Because here's the opposite view from Elle, which I before you rang in, I found quite compelling. She says, I think you're right about it being generational. Your generation, meaning mine, as you said, was probably the last one that felt it got some measurable reward for the extra effort and security. I would argue that millennials like me were brought up with the same belief and yet got a lot less out of it. And now the next generation, i.e. you, has seen that, and it's being fooled. Also, if we're going to be working for longer with less chance of a decent pension, maybe being able to wash your clothes in your lunch break provides a bit more mental balance for the future. We will reconvene, James, when you're 30.
I also think it's a mental thing as well.
Yes, that works.
We would like to go to an office and socialise with different people.
Yes.
Because we've been brought up in a very sort of toxic schooling environment of sort of, all of these changing, rules and
and isolation. I think you skipped, for your schooling at least, you skipped lockdown, but the privations of lockdown rest very, very heavily on younger generations. And so, but again, the boss is not saying, I want you to come to work because I want you to be a well-rounded human being with a better social life and the chance of meeting your life partner. Although I guess that chance has diminished a little bit as well with changing workplace rules and regulations. What are you doing in the theatre?
So I'm a theatre technician. I work on the fly floor and sort of pulling cloths in and out.
At the Playhouse?
At the Playhouse, indeed.
Is it safe?
I think it is.
Yes?
But
because there were worries last year. I didn't mean your job. I meant the actual theatre. Because there were funding worries last year, weren't there, at the Playhouse?
So there, I think, obviously, it's above my pay grade, but
yes.
We've had a very successful panto season.
There we go. Oh, no, you haven't.
And oh, yes, we have.
Oh, there he is. You've got a voice. You could do the voice of God, couldn't you, for some productions? If you needed it, you could do the voice of God for some productions at the Nottingham Playhouse.
I've got something to fall back on.
Tell your boss you've got a Z-list celebrity endorsement for your work as a voiceover artist.
Oh, lovely.
There you go. Lovely. He said lovely. There you go. You could advertise butter with a voice like that. It's 11:48.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:51. Who was it? We're trying to remember. Someone said that if you want someone to solve a problem, Keith thinks it was Bill Gates. If you want someone on the workforce to solve a problem, you get the laziest person on the team to do it. Surely the lazy and clever person. You'd have to be. Couldn't just be the laziest, unless you had. So what they'll do, they'll come up with the way to do it that is easiest. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I don't think it works in the field of radio presenting. What does it? I don't know. Speaking of lazy, I completely forgot to reveal the answer to the question. In fact, Keith said to me, don't forget the Nigel Farage reveal, which is not a phrase I think we should be introducing into the public discourse anytime soon. But the question was, Nigel Farage received £189,000 last year for his work in the charity... No, he didn't. For promoting gold bullion. I think in America. Or here, who knows? But a nice £189,000 cheque for working as a brand ambassador for a gold bullion company. Do you think he got that money for doing A, 4 weeks' work, B, 4 months' work, C, 4 hours' work, or D, 4 years' work? Looking at your answers to this, I think you may have worked out the secret behind many of my multiple choice hook and teasers, because not a single person got it wrong. 763,000 people got it right. I may have made that number up. So no, there it is. Man of the people and tireless campaigner for the people of Clacton received £189,000 in return for 4 hours' work, which he managed to squeeze in alongside his work as a presenter on GBBs and various other commitments in America and elsewhere. He managed to squeeze. Oh, and he's an MP as well, of course. But there you go, 4 hours. It's nice work if you can get it. But remember, everybody's getting poorer. 11:53 is the time. Back to, oh my God, it's almost as if we plan it. Jordan is in Clacton-on-Sea. Jordan, what made you pick up the phone? Yeah, I'm very well. What's on your mind? Working from home. Should the boss be able to order you?
Well, I mean, for me, I've been in tech I'm a software engineer, first off. I've been in tech for about 10 years and kind of got spoiled during COVID with the work from home. And it was lovely. And I think we proved, obviously, that we could do it. There's no impact. I sit most day with my headphones on, listening to music or yourself.
Oh, hello. Thank you. Yeah.
And I think now kind of we've had this push to go in 2 days. I think the point is, like, working in London, it's a long commute.
It's a bit of a trek, isn't it? Yes.
It is. It's expensive as well. I like paying it, but I understand it. It's fine. I think now it feels like there's talks of going to 5 days. It's kind of like, well, why are we doing this?
Do they explain why?
No, they never explain why. They just kind of do it. I think the point is, I know that the leadership themselves aren't going in 5 days a week, so it kind of feels like lead by example. I think as well, we've been told we're moving office soon, and I think the idea is that they've spent a lot of money in central London doing these offices up for us, and they want their money's worth out of it because they signed these huge leases on them, and we're having to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be part of it. And I think one of the early penny drop moments when I couldn't understand why the usual suspects were having kittens about people wanting to continue to work from home, even when the argument was that it improved productivity. It was because, of course, they were defending the wealth that is invested in property, defending the big property owners, defending the funds that have investment in the property companies. And so there's going to be part of that. What have you been told to do? I don't want you to be indiscreet, but so you'd got used to doing 5 days from home, had you?
Yeah, so when I joined this job, it was always 5 days at home, and I think it then went up to 2 days. I didn't mind that, but those 2 days have just been drowned in meetings, and it's all let's do face-to-face meetings instead of on Teams, and it's kind of...
And does that make any difference, do you feel, in your bones?
Being in the office?
Yeah, well, a face-to-face meeting. I don't have experience of this. I did some...
No, I mean, it's better. It's nicer, but the point is, as soon as one person isn't available for that meeting and didn't come in today, you're all on laptops anyway. So it doesn't
even if you're sitting in the same room, the one person who's not... Yeah, it's a funny one. And again, do you think it's generational, listening to today's programme?
I think so, but I think, for me, if a boss turned around and said, we're in 5 days a week, I know that a lot of us, regardless of generation, would quit. I don't think we'd stay for it because I think we know our own worth and we know that we can get other jobs.
And that is not true of all sectors, of course, or indeed all workers. But it's ultimately the point. And I wonder how it will play out actually in the example that we're exploring today, or rather the example that has launched us into this exploration today, which is at His Majesty's Land Registry, where 4,000 staff are going on a work to rule form of industrial action after being ordered to return to the office for 3 days a week. If you're processing house purchases, essentially making sure that the Land Registry is adjusted to reflect property transactions, I mean, again, it's possibly going to be job specific, but my untutored eye cannot see why you need to be in the office to do that at all, except that the bosses want you to. It's a bit like that Jacob Rees-Mogg thing, which, like almost everything Jacob Rees-Mogg did, was simultaneously cruel and stupid. He insisted that people come back to the office and couldn't tell you why. even after it was pointed out to him that they had more staff than desks. So if everybody had come back to the office, half of them would have been sitting on the stairwell. But things like that, mere details have never bothered Big J. Giles is in Tilburg in the Netherlands. Giles, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Nice to be on. I don't think it's an age thing. I'm 59. I think it's more to do with issues of control and investment.
Yeah.
There's the old proverb about does a tree falling in a forest with no one to hear it make any sound?
Yes.
I think with some managers, they don't think that someone doing work, unless they can see them out of their office door, are actually doing any work.
You've already made it generational, because a 25-year-old is less likely to feel that way than a 55-year-old, albeit that a 25-year-old is less likely to be the boss.
But then you've got people like me who completely disagree with that, and you've got people in their 20s.
No, but when we talk
like,
about no, stop it. You can't. I mean, you don't diffuse a generalisation by coming up with exceptions to it. Obviously, we've spoken to a 22-year-old who is on what I would consider to be the older argument, and we're going to speak to some older people who are on the younger argument. But the generality will be that if you haven't always accepted the necessity of working in the office, then you are less likely to accept the necessity of working in the office.
Would you accept maybe that it's more to do with the kind of hierarchies within a company?
No, that's why the bosses want to do it. It's not an answer to the question of whether or not they should be allowed to.
Oh, I don't think they should be allowed to.
Why not?
I think... Well, I mean, it used to be considered completely proper to work on Saturdays, to send children up chimneys, and not to pay women the same.
Yes,
I think insisting
you put it on that list. I like that.
Fundamentally, at the end of the day, in 20 years' time, this will be a non-argument.
So you think it's cruel to insist that people, without any evidence, leaving productivity off the table, taking productivity as a constant, you think it's cruel to tell them where they work, even though you pay their wages? And you're comparing a modern office to a Victorian chimney stack.
I'm looking at accessibility and fairness.
I think you might be right.
If you look at parents, the ability, I'm in the Netherlands, lots of kids come home quite early in the afternoon. The ability to pick your kids up, drop your kids off, still do a day's work, but maybe have a break in mid-afternoon. Absolutely fantastic. It means far more people have access to the office and have less need for expensive childcare. People with issues, mental health issues, or neurodiverse people who find crowded offices challenging and confronting find it far easier to work from home. It's an issue of, and also not just people with special cases like that. Fred, who wants to have a game of squash in the middle of the afternoon and is typically will work to 9 o'clock in the evening. No reason why he shouldn't do that, and he wouldn't be able to do that working in a conventional office. I've got 2 dogs. I don't have kids to worry about any longer because they're grown up, but I might want to go for a walk in the middle of the afternoon on a nice snowy day like today. It's not going to be possible at work. It's not going to affect my productivity at all, as I'm still going to get a full 8 hours done. But I have a more enjoyable life.
No, I know all of that. No, you're still. Some of your points have been brilliant, but we're still in danger of getting distracted from the central point. Okay. I understand the advantages and the attractions of working from home. I understand the appeal of it. The fundamental relationship between employer and employee is not affected by what you describe. It is simply whether or not, by dint of paying your wages, I have the right to determine and insist that you work in a certain space, even though the job is safe, the job is not damaging you. All of the parallels with Victorian chimney sweeps can be dismissed, except the final one, which is that you need to explain to me why that boss should be able to do that, and I'm not sure I can.
I think they have been able to do that because of the ratio of people looking for work and the number of vacancies.
Supply and demand. But why would they want to? And then we come back to the psychology where you started. I got a feeling that a few years ago, I'd have because you challenged my own preconceptions on this so effectively. I think I'd have been a little bit rude to you a few years ago, because you've really made me stop and think. Well, when you said the chimney sweep stuff, I think I'd have probably balked a bit, but you've made me think actually in ways that I hadn't thought of before. It's a huge leap in one sense, and yet in another, unless you can explain to me why, it's fair. That's why Giles is listing all the benefits of working from home, and you can list all the benefits of working from the office if you want. But if the scales aren't dead even at the end of that listing, why should the boss be able to order you to do something that actually diminishes the quality of your life without improving the quality of your work? Ooh, I was 60-40 at the beginning. I've got a horrible feeling I might be 52-48 now. It's Mystery Hour after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Oh, really? Already? The first of 2025, you say? Have you got used to saying that yet? You don't need to say it, do you? The only time you really noticed the change in year was when we had checks and you were paying for your pizza. You need to be my age, I think, to recognise this reference. But the only time you'd get it wrong, you'd write a cheque and you'd put last year's year in the slot. You don't really need to type it anymore, ever, do you? Or write it. You certainly don't write it down. But when the pizza delivery person arrived and you had to give them the cheque that would hopefully not bounce, I'm going back to my student days now, you'd suddenly, oh, hang on a minute, it's 2025. It's 1992 now, isn't it? Not 1991. I digress slightly. Why does David keep texting me to ask whether I've seen Meet the Rees-Moggs on Discovery Plus? Take a wild guess, David. Honestly, sounds like an anxiety dream. Mystery Hour, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. And of course, many of you will be playing it for the first time as proud owners of a Mystery Hour board game. If you were a good boy or girl and Santa Claus brought you all of your wishes. You can win your own if you were not lucky enough to find one in your stocking this Christmas. You can still win one by being my favourite contributor of the week. I never know. Our phone lines are already full, by the way, so be patient. We'll try and free up a couple. Some of the people, at least two of the people who've rung in will be wombats, asking either daft questions or questions that are not capable of being answered. So don't be... there you go, there's one free now. We've got rid of a wombat. I say that very affectionately, but I'm very fond of wombats. But every time a wombat is politely invited to wobble away, then a phone line becomes free for a non-wombat, or possibly a wombat with a good question. 7 minutes after 12 is the time. What is he talking about? Andy's been in touch with a complaint about the board game. I'll pass this on to the relevant authorities. He says, I bought the board game, James. I read out 4 questions, but nobody rang me. That's quite good. I like that. People ring in with questions, mysteries, riddles, enigmas, and then other people ring in with the answers. And somewhere in between those two stools, magic lies. I don't know why. I don't know how. And I try not to think about it. Because the more you think about these things, sometimes the more you potentially jeopardise the magic. But there it is. Favourite contribution of the week. And I am afraid my decision is final. Although I'll take some suggestions from you. Wins a Mystery Hour board game. A proper grown-up competition, like a professional radio presenter might do. And therefore, I have to refer you to the terms and conditions that are available at lbc.co.uk. You can also find out more about the Mystery Hour board game at mysteryhour.co.uk. And I don't know, we started bringing back the laugh out loud moment, but I guarantee that between now and 1 o'clock you will laugh out loud at least once. And that you'll know more than you do now. Not necessarily anything of use to you or anything very long, anything that stays in your memory for very long, but you will know more by 1 o'clock than you do now. Shall we crack on? Oh, a quick mention. I didn't know that. Quite a few of you have been watching an old episode of Have I Got News For You? That must have popped up on Dave or whatever channel it is that the reruns are on. And there's footage of me describing Elon Musk as a Bond villain in 2017. That's why you tune in, eh? 2017. Describing Elon Musk, who no one had really heard of, as a bit of a Bond villain. Go me. Mark's in Leicester. Mark, question or answer?
It's a question. How are you, James?
Very well, Mark. What's on your mind?
Right.
A
couple of holidays we had last year.
Oh, aye.
On the beach, both of them.
Very
now,
nice.
On 2 different parts of the world. On one of them, there were shells everywhere on the beach. You could walk, you could fill a bucket within 100 yards.
Yeah, where was
shells
that?
Everywhere. The shells one was Mexico.
Oh, very nice. Which bit? Where were you?
Playa Mujeres.
Very nice.
Yeah, just south of Cancun.
I know it, on your way to Tulum, about halfway between Cancun and Tulum.
Yeah, no, it's lovely there. Then shells everywhere. You could fill your pockets with it. Then another holiday in the Maldives.
Look at you! Woo! No. Good year, was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Carry on.
Absolutely no shells whatsoever. You could walk a mile either way and not come even to a fragment of a shell. Why is that?
I'll tell you what I'm bothered by now. I'll be back to you in a minute. I've got 6 pens in my hand and not one of them works.
Oh, no.
There's my mystery. How has this happened? Who is it? Who's been bowdlerising all these pens? Some of them have had the nib removed.
It's a wombat.
It is the bloody wombats. Hang on, does this one work?
Yeah, a wombat's on you.
I can't write down your question. There, I finally got one. I'm going to throw all these in the bin. That's what I call teamwork. So, why no shells? Not specifically in the Maldives, but why are some beaches full of shells and some beaches are not?
Absolutely clear. Not even a fragment of a shell.
That's incredible. Was it a very expensive resort?
No, not particularly. It was all right. Yeah, it was okay. It was nice. But I don't think that I don't think they take the shells out of expensive beaches, do they?
Well, I was just wondering.
Or do they plant them?
Maybe they do. I'm thinking about White Lotus. Have you watched White Lotus?
No.
So that's set on like really high-end, all-inclusive style resorts, and I could just about imagine a team being sent out every morning to pick all the shells off the beach. But I think I don't. It's unlikely, Mark. It's unlikely.
No, definitely not.
Would you recommend the Maldives for Keith looking for a holiday?
Yes,
is it nice?
It was lovely. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
And you can't fault it. So you'd think, I mean, there must be sea life, there must be crustaceans. Why are there no shells at all on some beaches while other beaches are full of them? I like that question. It's a really good Mystery Hour example of a question as well. 0345 6060973. Shlomi is in Manchester. Shlomi, question or answer?
Question.
Carry on.
So we've had the bad weather now, all icy, snowy roads, etc., and we've got these fantastic yellow lorries driving up and down the highways, motorways, gritting our roads for us.
Well, some roads, not all.
Some roads.
Yeah.
Question is, who are these drivers that we suddenly manage to assemble? Where do they come out from? Do they sit around all year waiting for bad weather and they just hop out when there's the need for some grit? Do they have day jobs? Are they?
I like that question. I've got a feeling, Shlomi, that this might be one of the early roots of Mystery Hour itself. You might have just stumbled across some of the magic that made Mystery Hour in the very first place. Because I was obsessed for a while with gully suckers. Do you know what a gully sucker is?
I do not.
Oh, well, you've come to the right place. A gully sucker is a similar engine that clears gutters so that they don't block up. So it sort of goes up the road with a big hose sucking all the gunk from the side of the road so it doesn't fall down the grills and gunk up the sewers, I suppose, the drainage systems. And I think at one point the gully suckers and the gritters were the same vehicle with different attachments, different applications, which is something I don't know why. I found it fascinating. But I've also got a feeling that it might be the bin men. I think the bin lorries, the people that drive the bin lorries might double up as gritters.
I saw that, but we've still got the bins being collected today, so...
I know, but they can do a bit of overtime, can't they?
No.
Yeah, they can.
They've got hours that they've got to keep to.
So what do not the vehicles? I saw your question on the board. I thought the question was going to be about the vehicles, but I actually prefer it. What do the people driving the gritters do the rest of the year?
That's it. You got it.
I bet you 50p it's the bin men.
Oh, I don't think so.
I know you don't. That's why I'm making you the offer that you can't refuse. 50p.
Because it's not about overtime because they've got to do it any time. If it starts raining, snowing now, they'll be out.
Yeah, but they'll just ring around to find something. They'll be, Shlomi, you all right? You free? Can you do me the gritters tomorrow morning?
I've got a bin round to be doing. I can't do it.
All right, I'll find someone else.
I don't think so.
Shlomi's got the day off tomorrow. I'll give him a ring. He'll do it for double time.
Could be.
We'll find out, won't we? Who drives the gritter? What do the gritter drivers do for the rest of the year? It's 12:15. Nearly. I'll squeeze in one more. Colin's in Ruislip. Colin, question or answer?
It's a question, James. It's to do with petrol prices.
Well, I don't really do motoring questions, Colin.
It's not a motoring question. It's how the petrol stations changed all their prices on the display. And when do they do it?
Is that a motoring? Are you sure that's not a motoring question?
Well, that's not nothing to do with vehicles, is it? It could be with electric charging vehicles. But
all right, it's not need to be rude. I'm just thinking out loud.
I know. I'm just got to squeeze it in before the news.
We used to have a Colin rule. Don't you worry about that. There's no news till 5:30. It's just a normal junction. So go on then. Sorry, I interrupted you.
What happens? I drove past a petrol station yesterday, and
that's motoring. That's definitely motoring, though. You drove past. You drove past a petrol station. That is motoring.
And it was 1:33. Today it's 1:35.
Oh.
The station's open 24 hours a day. At what time and how do they change all the prices, especially on the motorways? Because there's always someone in the motorway station.
This is totally a motoring question.
I've got past it.
I know you have. You're here now. It's not you I'm cross with.
I'm the first one of the year that's got passed.
It's only the second blooming call, and we've got a third call, and we've got a motoring question on the board. This just sets the... we're having a debate. Hang on, excuse me a moment, Carl. Of course it's a motoring question.
OK, let's hope we get an answer for it.
Let's hope we get an answer. Why are you confused? Surely there's just a button inside the booth where the till is. They go, we're putting up the prices now. To give
but
it
that has to change all the pumps. But if you pull in and it's 133 and they push the button...
Yeah.
It's all gone up while
they shut it.
Just driven in.
They shut it for a few minutes while they push the button and then they open it. No, it doesn't work.
And motorway service stations, you can't shut that.
So have you ever seen the price change in a petrol station?
I've never seen it, but you go there
a magical
one day
moment,
and the
wouldn't
next
it?
day it's gone up.
Be a magical moment, wouldn't it?
Well, someone's in a petrol station listening must know how they do it.
Yeah, well, I think I've told you how they do it.
OK.
But, well, I mean, obviously, you can't go definitive with that. I'm tempted to put a fourth question on the board, whether or not Colin's question is actually a motoring question or not. But I think that would be a bit meta, Colin, wouldn't it?
It would, yes.
You're on. Shells, gritters, I keep seeing grifters. It's like being on Twitter. Shells, gritters and petrol. It's 12:16.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 18 minutes after 12. Why are some beaches shell-free? Who drives the gritters? This is not a motoring question. This is a question about council work deployment. Who drives the gritters for the rest of the year when gritters are not needed? No, that's not it. What do the people who drive the gritters do for the rest of the year when gritters are not needed? And how do they change the price on the boards in the petrol stations? I don't know if that is a mystery, but we'll soon find out. We'll soon know how or when. How and when. When and how. 19 after 12. Colin is in. That's two Collins in a row. Three if you include the bloke in the advert. Colin, question or answer?
Hello, James.
Hello,
it's
Colin.
a question.
Oh, splendid. Carry on.
Yeah. How do I get a grapevine to produce seedless grapes?
Grafting, mate. That's actually true. It sounded like I was joking, didn't it? As in you need to do the graft. You need to do the hard graft. But seedless grapes are grafted. So you create via generation after generation after generation of mutation, you create a grape that grows without a seed in it, and then you graft that onto a vine, and you'll grow more seedless grapes.
Yeah. Oh, that's fine. Thanks.
What do you mean that's fine? That's incredible. How do you know that, James? What are your qualifications?
Well, I did wonder, but how do you get the graft to go onto the vine to produce the seedless anyway?
It's the same way with all grafting. You just, you snip a bit off and then you cut open the host plant and you strap it together and you hope that it takes. And when it does take, you'll get seedless grapes growing off the thing that you've grafted on.
But how do you teach it not to produce the seeds in the first place?
Well, there's two ways of doing that. There is a root hormone you can spray that persuades it that it is growing a seed when it isn't, so that the grape develops. I'm not very clear on that side of the horticultural technology. But the other one is quite straightforward. You just have lots and lots of natural selection, the genetic manipulation. So you get a grape with a very small seed and you grow grapes from that. And then one of them has got an even smaller seed than all the other grapes. And then you grow grapes from that. And then one of them has got an even smaller seed. And then you grow grapes from that. And then one of them has got an even smaller seed. And then you grow grapes from that. This goes on for thousands and thousands of generations. Would you like me to continue?
Well, I'm grateful that they've been doing it this long.
Yeah. And then you've got one that is, to all intents and purposes, seedless. And you grow a grape from that.
Yeah. Long may we produce those.
Long may we produce those. Round of applause for me, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin. I'm glad we got rid of that rule. It is 21 minutes after 12. Elliot's in Perth in Western Australia. Elliot, question or answer?
Answer, please, mate.
Carry on, mate.
To the shells question.
Yes.
So, basically, if you've got more of a rocky shore or a rocky seabed,
yeah,
then you get more of the mollusks, things living in shells, living in that area, and then when they die, they wash up onto the beach.
So if you've got uninterrupted acres of sand and sand alone running out deep into the ocean, then there's nowhere for the mollusks to live and breed and thrive, and therefore die, which means that there are no empty shells to be washed back up onto the beach.
Exactly. rocky shores, you see it all over the place, covered in limpets and stuff.
You do?
You go to a rocky shore covered in limpets, there'll be limpet shells all over the beach.
Yeah, it's
somewhere where it's just pure sand. You swim out, you get to the sandbank, there's no rocks about, they don't wash up.
Because they haven't got, and you're talking about, hundreds, if not thousands of years worth of shells washing up in a habitat, from a habitat which is conducive to crustaceans, not just limpets. You might have expected a few...
Mollusks. Some crustaceans.
Yeah, I meant mollusks. Mollusks. Thank you for correcting me. It's very important. No, I don't mean crustacea. But I might have expected a few razor clams, even on a sandy beach.
Well, yeah, you can get them.
Maybe they prefer the cold water.
You got to dig down to get them.
Yeah, I know, but the shells, you don't need to dig down to get the empty shells. They would stay on the surface, wouldn't they?
That is a very good point, mate. I have
call it
no
the razor.
idea why they're not knocking about.
I call it the razor clam conundrum, Elliot. I don't know. I mean, we're talking about tropical beaches, so maybe razor clams don't thrive in it, because I always see them in Norfolk. That's what's made me think of them, and I can do that thing with the salt where you get them to come to the surface that the kids love. Well, I say the kids love it. They don't anymore. They did when they were little. They'd be like, "Dad, stop being weird."
I'm in Western Australia now, so it's all very different.
Yeah, of course. Qualifications.
To the UK. I was on the. I did wildlife ecology and conservation science at uni, and did a module on marine ecosystems.
Well, that'll do. Round of applause for Elliot. Blimey.
Cheers, mate.
No, cheers to you. 24 after 12 is the time, and we've got that one nailed down. Jim's in Widnes. Jim, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, Jim.
Hi, James. It's the answer of the glitter question.
Thank you, Jim. Take it away.
Currently, I can only speak for my town, James. It's contracted to the company that repair the roads for the local council.
Yes.
I mean, going back a number of years, I was a gritter driver for a number of years. I'm a joiner by trade. They asked for volunteers to go out and actually drive the gritter wagons during cold spells.
Who owned the gritter wagons? The company? Or
the company owns the gritter wagons, yeah.
Gosh.
Can I mention? I don't want to mention the name.
No, you can if you want. In this
town, it's Lambros.
Okay.
Who actually do repairs on the roads and things like that.
So they're in charge of road maintenance, full stop, all elements.
Yeah, but then obviously, I mean, you were quite right in saying as overtime.
Yeah.
These guys come in and they drive the gritter wagons as and when required.
And is it just parked up for the rest of the year?
It's just parked up for the rest of the year, James, yeah.
Crikey.
In the council yard.
I mean, it has to be, does it? Even though it's owned by the private company?
Even though it's owned by the private company, yeah.
It parts it in.
So they contracted to the council.
Yeah, I get it. That's a perfect answer. Qualifications. I bloody did it, says Jim.
Well, I did it. I worked for the council for.
Is it fun? Is it? I mean, you drive very slowly in a gritter, do you? Is it? Does it have any attractions, or is it just a nice bit of overtime?
It's great fun, James.
Yeah, I thought it might be. I don't know why. Why is it great fun? Why is it?
It's great fun from the point of view that it's funny when a car is following a gritter wagon. They stay right the way back because they don't want to be hit by the grit.
And is it? Do you do it on your own?
Flashing lights on the top.
You
obviously,
do? Yeah.
It's cold. And you're driving this big truck, this big powerful truck.
I get it.
I don't know whether it's calibrated on the back for the spread of grit.
Okay.
Depending on the severity of the weather.
Got it.
It's calibrated on the back.
Do you have a co-pilot or do you fly solo?
Solo.
Well, that's all I need, Jim. You've nailed it. Round of applause for Jim.
Thank you, James.
No, thank you. So, I mean, that's the point, you see. That's why I'm fascinated by gritters and gully suckers, because you need them. Even though cost-effectively, they make no sense. We're only going to use it for a week. Some years we won't use it at all. But what happens if you haven't got one? What happens if you haven't got one? On that week when you needed one, you have pile-ups on the road. You have deaths, casualties, impossible obstacles to get past. So you need one, but we don't use it most years. See, that's it. That's what I find fascinating. I was thinking about it the other day in the context of leaves on pavements. I was walking up a pavement. This is what you tune in for. This is the kind of quality content that you expect from me by now. You've probably heard it before as well, but it's a really helpful illustration of politics and economics. So council, wherever I was, I forget where, the council has obviously decided not to clear up leaves as much as it used to do. And that will save money until someone slips over and sues the council for their broken leg. which will cost money. So I would presume that in the long term, clearing the leaves is cost effective. The money for damages comes out of insurance or budgets, and then you pay the insurance. So in the long term, clearing the leaves is almost certainly cost effective. But if you've been ordered to reduce your budget by 10%, not clearing the leaves probably looks like an intelligent thing to do. I apologise if you don't find this kind of meandering as anywhere near as interesting or as important as I do. But I'll try and limit myself to 1 or 2 a week. Jim, great work. Ron, Aberdeen. Ron, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on.
Is the Earth's mass getting smaller? And by that I mean today...
We were talking about gritters a minute ago. What's going on? Go on then. Yes.
Okay. So if you were to take a mass reading today of the Earth, it would have X amount of mass, yeah?
Yeah,
so
I suppose.
If I was to go, for an example, if I was to go and have an old shed that weighed perhaps 300 kilograms, and I burned it for waste,
yeah,
where does that shed produce 300 kilograms of waste?
Yes.
Or where does the mass go? Because your remains would not be, yes, some goes up into the atmosphere and whatnot, but...
Well, hang on a minute. In scientific terms, I find the phrase "and whatnot" quite troubling.
Yeah.
Because that might be the bit that we're missing. So if you could do it in laboratory conditions, so you have a shed which contains enough oxygen to burn, and it's in a sealed environment, and and you can somehow weigh the contents of the sealed environment. Then when it has finished burning, you can weigh the contents of the sealed environment. My instinct tells me it would be exactly the same. No, my instinct doesn't tell me that. My intellect tells me that it must be exactly the same. My instinct tells me that it can't be.
Yeah.
So where's the X? So your question is, if there is lower mass, where's it gone?
Yes. Yeah, because just using the shed example, you burn it outside.
Yeah.
And so much goes up, you can physically see X amount going up into the atmosphere. But does 300 kilos suddenly become non-300 kilos? There'll be moisture in it.
We've got to keep it out of the outdoors. We've got to keep it in the sealed environment that I've just invented.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Because that's the only way you could conduct. That's called laboratory conditions. That is, Ron.
Yeah.
That's in laboratory conditions. If you could weigh the mass of this, so this studio that I'm in now is pretty close to airtight. If you turn the air conditioning off, and so you come in here, you set fire to the desk. Literally, not metaphorically, as I do every day. You set fire to the desk, set fire to the microphone, metaphorically, and then you can somehow weigh everything. I like that question a lot. You're on.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on. No, that's it. Does it? Yeah. Where is it? Yeah. If it doesn't, where's it gone? 0345 6060 973. Ron, stay safe. Amelia Cox has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:34 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We've done the shells and we've done the gritters. I keep seeing the word grifters. I'm haunted by grifters, and I'm not even on Twitter anymore. Who changes the prices in petrol state? How do they do it? On the things, with the thing, and Ron's question wasn't as good as I thought it was it? So suddenly occurred to me during the break what I was missing in my laboratory conditioned experiment. If you could contain it. No, even then, you see. But someone cleverer than me can answer the question. Gregor is in Kilburney. Gregor, question or answer?
Hello, James.
Hello.
It's a question.
Carry on, Gregor.
My question is about the phrase Napoleon complex.
Oh, yes.
I would like to know why we pick on Napoleon. And this is something that I've known for a while, that he was of average height. He wasn't particularly small at the time. Is that true? It is true. Well, I didn't do my due diligence and look it up beforehand. So your producer actually looked it up, and she confirmed that he was 5'6", which was average height for the time.
Oh, for the time, was it really?
So I would like to know at what point we kind of pinned on Napoleon the sort of short guy syndrome.
I think I might be able to answer this, although I won't be able to prove it, so I can't go definitive. This is going to seem like a very odd question, Gregor.
Okay.
And I'm working on the principle that you will be familiar with a song that was popular in previous generations.
Oh, I'm not very old, James.
I know you're not, but it's a very familiar and popular song that I'd be amazed if you'd never heard it. But if you have never heard it, then this question is not just going to seem weird, it's going to seem deeply inappropriate.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
How many testicles do you think Adolf Hitler had?
Oh, what, the other in the Albert Hall, that one?
Bingo.
So is Napoleon in that song?
No, but it's wartime propaganda.
I see. Okay, so you think it was during the Napoleonic Wars, all the propaganda had him as this little short guy?
Almost certainly on this side of the English Channel. The Duke of Wellington's top crack PR team managed to perpetrate the myth that Napoleon was a bit of a short arse.
I think that's a great theory, James.
It's probably right as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes sense. It'd be nice to hear the actual story from some.
Yeah, I know. All right, I'm not giving myself a round of applause, Gregor. I just think I deserved a little bit more credit for providing you with an interesting answer in such an imaginative way.
Can I give you some credit for mentioning the thing about the gritters not doing every road? Because I spent all Sunday morning out hand gritting our road because the gritters don't do it anymore.
What a fantastic community-spirited man you are.
Oh, I'm not looking for praise.
Well, you're getting a little bit as well. I was looking for praise, and you didn't give me any at all. So there's a moral there for all of us. Okay, you're on. Where did it come from? This myth that Napoleon was particularly short. And also the other bit. Do you know the other bit, which I wonder if it's propaganda as well? Do you know the Not Tonight Josephine story?
Yes, I do.
Because that makes him sort of a bit... That demans him, that unmans him as well, doesn't it? Because Josephine apparently was asking him for some sexual attention. And he said, "Not tonight, Josephine." So he's both short and, I don't know what word to use now, but not very sexy.
I mean, I believe there was a letter. I mean, he had some strange preferences. There was a letter where he sent home to Josephine where he said, "I'm on my way home, don't wash."
Yes, that is also true.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave that one hanging, I think, Gregor. Let people make what they want of that. 12:38 is the time. Why, where, what did Napoleon ask Josephine not to... No, I'm joking. Why did Napoleon achieve a reputation for being very short when he was, apparently for the times, of above average height? Did I mispronounce your name, Gregor?
No, that's my name.
You say Gregor?
No, Gregor, yeah.
Yeah, I did mispronounce
honestly,
it.
most people call me Gregor. Oh, did you say Gregor?
Yeah, Gary's crossed with me.
Oh,
I beg your pardon, Garay. Garay
is
cross with me for mispronouncing your name. Gregor.
You don't call me George, that's fine.
No, from now on, I will always call people whose name is spelt like yours, Gregor. Thank you. Susan is in Epsom. Susan, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
The change in the petrol price question.
Before you answer it, Susan, is it a motoring question or not?
I think it's a motoring question.
I think it's a motoring question as well. It doesn't matter how violently you shake your head, mate. It's a motoring question. You put it through.
Exactly.
The first mystery hour of the year. Unbelievable. Carry on, Susan.
Basically, the reason I know about this is just as a customer, because I drove into a very busy petrol station, chose it based on price.
Yes.
Happened to be one of the people paying at the pump.
Yes.
And I just didn't notice that a slightly different message came up as I was paying.
What do you mean by message?
Like a little thing came up like price initializing or something like that.
On the display where you'd see the price.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I thought, that looks a bit strange. So I got my little receipt and I thought, I'm just going to check.
Yeah.
And it was a completely different price. It'd gone up by, a couple of pence or something.
Yeah.
And so I walked into the petrol station kiosk and basically said, well, when I drove in, it was this price, but now you've charged me that. And they gave me a refund.
Well, I never.
So they basically just do it whenever they want, I think is the answer to the question.
Well, no, because he wants to know about the big signs outside the petrol station. But I presume... Go on.
Yeah, when I came out, the price had changed.
So that happens automatically as well. They press a button inside.
Someone's just doing it. Yeah.
And it goes up outside. You got your refund. It happened to you. I mean, I'm tempted. I don't know, but I mean, how many people has this happened to? Would you excuse me for a moment, Susan? Would you just excuse me for one moment?
Yeah.
Thank you. How many people have rung in with Susan's experience? No other people. But there would have been other people in the petrol station at that precise moment to whom it could have. So it's not radioed territory, is it, by any stretch of the imagination? But I'm surprised.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very busy. I think it was a time. It was a couple of years ago when the prices were quite volatile.
Yeah.
So maybe that had something to do with it.
Maybe it was happening. Yeah, like you say. But,
station.
no, well, I think you've answered Colin's question about how it happens, although I will accept one more level of definitiveness from someone who actually presses the buttons. But there it is. It happens live in that moment. How do we know? Because it happened to Susan. Here's your round of applause.
Very much.
No, thank you very much. Christian's in Marlborough. Christian, question or answer? Answer.
It's a question, James.
Carry on.
So, is there a word that describes the feeling of when you do a journey for the very first time, be it a walk or a drive or a cycle, when the journey outbound feels definitely longer than the inbound journey?
That's a very.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, I do know exactly what you mean. I do know. So, is there a phrase for it?
Is there? Yes, exactly. Like today, apricity would be the word you use to describe the feeling of warmth on your back, despite the fact that it's a cold winter's day.
Yes.
Is there a word that describes that? And it's typically the very first time you do the journey.
Well, that is why it happens. I happen to know why it happens.
Okay.
That's because of the, if you like, the psychic energy it takes to process new information.
Fair enough.
So your brain feels time moving more slowly because it's working harder, which I think makes sense.
That chap who knows everything about English language.
Yes.
Is it Mark? I just wondered if there was actually a word that encapsulated that particular feeling.
He's more on. I mean, this would be more Susie Dent's territory than Mark's.
Okay.
Mark's more of a sort of a etymology and origins man. But I mean, either way, I mean, everybody's welcome. Let's find out. I mean, there it is. Is there a word? Everyone recognises it, especially if you're cycling, I find. I don't know why.
Well, it doesn't matter to me. It seems if you walk or drive or cycle or
journey
whatever,
out feels much slower than journey back when you're doing it for the first time. Not so much in the future because you're processing new information. You're on. I like it. Thank you, Christian. It's coming up to 12:44. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Don't say the prices in the petrol station were volatile because of Liz Truss, James, writes Craig. Otherwise, there will probably be a legal letter coming your way. If you don't know what that story's about, you're going to have to look it up. Godfrey's in Tunbridge. Godfrey, question or answer?
It's an answer, James. Hello.
Very well, mate. Carry on.
It's regarding the petrol pumps and their price changes.
You're going to close this one down forever.
Well, I hope so. I did work in a famous convenience store that had a petrol station attached to it.
Why was it famous?
It's Tesco.
Oh, I see. It was a well-known brand. It wasn't. I thought you were going to say it was featured in an episode of Mindell or something like that. Or it's the one where Gavin and Stacey went on the Christmas special. So it wasn't a famous. It wasn't actually a famous convenience store attached to. But I'm being an idiot. I apologise. Carry on, Godfrey. So you worked on a petrol station forecourt, as it were.
I did indeed. And what happens is that there's a notification that comes through. I'm not quite sure exactly who it is.
Yeah.
I believe it's the
head office.
Head office.
Yeah.
And what happens is that we temporarily close the pumps. If there's somebody actually on the pump using it, we wait until they've finished. Anybody else who is waiting but not used it, we just say, "Can you hold on a minute? There's a price change."
Wow.
And then the manager will then go on to the master till, input the new price, whether it goes up or down. And also there's a little remote, because it's all digital now, there's a little remote control that you set the canopy price so that, it's visible from the road. It only takes a couple of minutes and then it's,
So I was right. I said you'd close down very briefly, do it, and then open up again. So I wonder what happened to Susan then, when she had an experience of actually seeing it in real time.
I'm not sure.
No. I believe her. I mean, when did you retire from this world?
I'm not retired. I'm just in a new job now. But I did that for 21. I was there for 21 years. I left about just coming up to 2 years ago.
So it's not going to be that the technology's moved on a pace in the last 3 years. It could be that the ones that are... So, okay. Well, I mean, I think you're probably both right, but you avoid situations like the one Susan found herself in by doing the things that you've just described, don't you?
Yeah, I would have thought so. I mean, if she's paying at the pump, I'm not sure how that works. We did have that, but even then...
Oh, that might be the difference. If you're paying at the pump, then you could get caught in that weird space-time vortex that Susan found herself engulfed.
That is very true. I mean, normally we would actually just say, hold on a moment, we're just changing the prices.
Yeah.
And carry on from there once it's done. As I say, it takes like 2 minutes.
Sometimes there might only be one person on the job.
Very true.
I like
No
it.
train.
Great work. What are you doing now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm on my break. I'm making deliveries. I've got a few left to go, and then it'll be back home.
Do you prefer that, being out and about, or do you miss...
Absolutely.
You do?
Absolutely.
Can I ask why?
I'd rather not say, but it's...
That's absolutely fine. That is why no Conservative MPs or indeed Reform MPs come on this programme, God. They're terrified of my tough questioning.
Well, it's just the freedom of the road.
Freedom of the road. Oh, we should get a theme tune. I love it.
Freedom of the road, and with what I'm delivering, everybody's happy to see me, and that's just great.
What do you deliver?
Wine.
12:46. Well played. Yeah, absolutely. And give him another one for the punchline. There we go. What do you deliver? Wine. Sensation. I tell you what, you think it's fun driving that? You should try get yourself behind the wheel of a gritter.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10 to 1. Do you want to listen to Liz Truss? Or do you want to play a game? Is this the real Liz Truss? Or is this one of those rather splendid online impersonators doing an impression of what Liz Truss would sound like if she had actually turned into a human hat stand? I'll let you decide.
Rachel Reeves has pushed this country to the brink of economic crisis through high taxes, high regulation, and disastrous net zero policies. When I tried to fix these problems back in 2022, I was undermined by the economic establishment, and I was forced to reverse the policies before they were even implemented. I was blamed for the LDI crisis, which the Bank of England has subsequently admitted was their fault. So let's look at the facts. Rachel Reeves borrowed far more in her budget than we did in 2022, but with no plans to pay it back through increased economic growth. Government gilt rates for both 10-year and 30-year are higher now than they were back in 2022. Yet at the time, I was smeared by the Labour Party and by members of my own party for having crashed the economy. I faced a 24-hour onslaught from the mainstream media, leaking and briefing. Where are those people now? The people who sabotaged the mini budget have led us inexorably to the path we're on now. It's only by reviving those policies that Britain will escape the economic doom loop we're now in.
I thought, I kid you not, I thought it was all the fault of eco-warriors and trans activists in the civil service. I'm sure that's what she said, if indeed that was really her and not one of those hilarious online impersonators. If you're wondering why she needs to do this, it's essentially because the entire model of entirely unhinged and unregulated economics is what drives the sort of weird ecosystem that's grown up around Tufton Street in sort of fetishization of untrammeled wealth. And we've now seen what happens when they get their hands on the steering wheel. So they have to mount this epic. I'll tell you what would be really funny if she was relying entirely on some Herbert from the Institute of Economic Affairs for the justification for her ludicrous claims. But even by the standards of Liz Truss, that would be too ridiculous. What? Oh, she is. So they absolutely have to get the idea out there that what happened when Liz Truss was Prime Minister was absolutely nothing to do with what Liz Truss did when she was Prime Minister. I'll say that again for people at the back. They have to get the idea out there that what happened when Liz Truss was Prime Minister was absolutely nothing to do with what Liz Truss did when she was Prime Minister. The closest thing to half a point that she's got would be on the gilts front, but as anybody paying attention knows, UK gilts, particularly 10-year gilts, are currently caught up in an international slump caused by fears that Donald Trump's new presidency will cause a trade war. So the German bond's gone up 2.519, the French equivalent's gone up 3.355. Ours has gone up, or even the American one has gone up to 4 points by 11 basis points. So that is an international crisis, if you like, or an international slump of which we are a part. The idea that it is in any way comparable to a unique and self-contained fiscal moment, which Kwasi Kwarteng has been refreshingly honest about subsequently, is for the birds. It was her. It was real. I apologise. Richard is in Cologne. Richard, question or answer?
It's an answer, or a partial answer anyway.
Carry on, Richard.
It's a partial answer about Napoleon.
Oh, yes.
One of the reasons people consider him to be small is because he had his own imperial guard, which he specified all had to be very tall people.
Really?
So I think they were sort of 6 foot plus.
That'd be quite hard to find in those days.
Yes, apparently it was, but he did manage to find them.
Like a sort of master race type.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But that gave rise to the fact that whenever he was out in public and he'd have his imperial guard guarding him, you know, people would look and go, "Oh, which one's Napoleon? Oh, it's the little guy in the middle."
Well, I mean, I love this. What are your qualifications for this claim?
No, it's just something I read a long time ago. And why I said it's a partial answer.
Yes.
The other part of the answer, which I can't remember the detail, was when he died and they measured him, by the time they sent these French measurements and they got back to England, somebody mistranslated it all and looked at those measurements and said, "Oh, he must have been a very small guy then," but in actual fact it was just confusion about the measurements used.
Okay.
But I say those were both in the article I read a long time ago.
I mean, especially if I think the Imperial Guard wore bearskin hats, didn't they, as well?
Probably, yeah.
So they'd be huge next to him. And he was wearing his little tricorn thing as well, so he'd look like a proper little fella.
Yeah, but apparently that's why in France, so yeah, he's the little guy in the middle.
So it wasn't proper. It had absolutely nothing to do with Adolf Hitler's testicles.
No, but nobody knows how many testicles Napoleon had. Although I suppose,
Right, I'd take a punt. I'd put money on 2.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think so, probably.
I don't, but we'll never know now, will we? Which is one of the great mysteries lost to history.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a round of applause.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.
It's my first one ever.
Oh, there you go. But let's hope not your last. Thank you, Richard. Josh is in Birmingham. Josh, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's an answer about a previous call about why return trips feel longer than the ones on the way out.
No, the other way round. The return trip feels slower. It feels quicker.
You're right, yeah.
I know.
Sorry, James, you forgive me.
That's all right, mate. Take your time. It can be very nerve-wracking being on the radio.
It is, yes. You're right. It's because on the way out, people tend to underestimate how long it will take.
Yes.
Because they're not necessarily familiar enough. And on the way back, they might see landmarks which sort of don't take as long to process.
Bingo. I knew that bit. Does it have a name?
It does, and my qualification for this is A-level psychology, return trip effect.
Oh, come off it. Return trip effect. Are you sure it's not called something like return and Schlossenberger?
James, I'm very...
Return trip effect. We need to send that one back to marketing, don't we?
James, I'm more truthful than Liz Truss. I'm telling you, that is true.
I'm sending a cease and desist letter as we speak. How dare you cast aspersions on Liz Truss's personal integrity? So the mystery was that Josh has solved. The mystery was, is there a name for the effect that makes a return trip feel quicker than an outward bound trip? And Josh's answer is yes, James. The name for the effect that makes a return trip feel quicker than the outward trip is the return trip effect.
But I do question it because on the way back from a holiday, that often feels a lot longer than the way there. Yeah,
on a plane.
On a plane, yeah.
Yeah, but you're not processing new information on a plane. You're just mourning the fact that you're not on holiday anymore.
James, you know what? I think you've answered my question.
That's what we're here for. What a team, Josh. Seriously, we should make an album together. Would you like a round of applause?
James, I don't think I deserve it, but please.
Of course you deserve it. You've introduced us to, if not the concept of, then at least the name of the return trip effect.
Absolutely.
I don't mean to make... psychology is desperately important, but has your psychology A-level ever come in this useful before?
Don't think so. It's never led me to LBC before.
Thanks, so look at that. Wow, what a moment. There it is. Should get a certificate. And Mark is in Barrow in Furness, but not to answer a wordy question for the very first time. Mark, what are you going to do?
I'm going to speak about the mass of the Earth.
Good Lord, but we don't have long, and Sheila is itching to get going,
that.
So make
Your
it sing.
Your initial reaction might be that the Earth gains mass because of meteorite impact.
Right.
It's going from micrometeorites up to really big ones that have to be left where they fell. There's quite a few like that.
This isn't what the question was, but you're always interesting, so I'll let you carry on anyway.
No, but it is true the Earth also loses weight through the atmosphere.
Yes.
And so things that drift upwards in the atmosphere, some of them are eventually lost into space.
Yes, but that wasn't what the question was. But I always find you interesting, so I'll let you carry on anyway.
Well, if you burn something, for example...
Yes.
The gas will go up. Any gas.
No, but it's not that. It's the energy being transformed into light and heat. So
that will happen. But
that's
that will not
the
affect
crucial
the mass
bit.
As such, yeah.
Will it not?
But,
sorry.
No, but all this is negligible compared to the whole mass of the Earth.
You're so clever. What are your qualifications on this one? Because normally you're our word expert.
I have a keen hobby interest in theoretical astronomy. I'm currently the chairperson of the Barrow Astronomy Society.
Good God, man. Seriously, do you ever sleep?
Oh, not necessarily very well. No, the mind keeps working.
I'm not surprised you've got the mysteries of the universe banging around in there, Mark.
Apparently the loss is greater than the gain, but not by very much.
Oh, there it is. Round of applause for Mark. Look at that. What a renaissance man he is. I've got to pick a favourite. I'm going to give it to Josh, actually. Right at the end there. Just snuck in. Mark's already won one, at least. So the winner of this week's Mystery Ad Board game is Josh in Birmingham. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a dizzying range of podcasts. I mean it as well. Everyone's in the podcast studio these days when I pop down there. Saw Danny Dyer the other day. Don't think he recognised me. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's Sheila Fogarty.
The time thing is really interesting, isn't it? It's perception, not reality.
You'll never guess what it's called.
I know what it's called now, but I find that fascinating.
Yeah, me too.
I do.
It's because your brain is processing new information on the way out and anticipating, whereas on the way back it's not.
You just go, going home.
I'm on my way back. And also, I've seen that windmill before, so your brain isn't going, windmill.
But it begs bigger questions than just your journey, doesn't it, the whole thing?
Mystery Hour always does.
It does, it always does. Have you read Carlo Rovelli's The Order of Time?
No.
Really great book. I've had to read it 103 times to understand it. But
and do you?
I understand enough of it. Yeah.
Right,
it's really good. The Order of Time is fantastic. Anyway.
James O'Brien on LBC.